Greetings, dear viewers. You're watching Arcane Paradox. We have prepared something special for you today. What if Sorting Hat entered Harry's mind and immediately summoned every Auror in Britain to arrest Dumbledore? Your likes and subscriptions keep this channel alive. If you enjoy our content, please show your support. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Chapter 1. The Hat's Judgment. The ancient stones of Hogwarts hummed with magic as the first years huddled together, their faces illuminated by thousands of floating candles. Harry Potter stood among them, his heart hammering against his ribs. The great hall stretched before him like something from a dream, too vast and magnificent to be real. Just 2 months ago, he'd been sleeping in a cupboard beneath the stairs, and now, Potter, Harry. The hall fell silent. Harry felt every eye burning into him as he stepped forward, his knees threatening to buckle. Whispers followed him like ghosts. "Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter?" Professor McGonagall gestured to the three-legged stool, her stern face revealing nothing. Harry caught Hagrid's encouraging smile from the staff table as he sat down. The last thing he saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was a sea of necks craning for a better look. Then darkness. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult. Very difficult. Harry gripped the edges of the stool, surprised at the intelligence in the hat's voice. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind, either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a thirst to prove yourself. But where to put you? Harry thought desperately of Gryffindor, of Ron's friendly face, of anywhere but Slytherin where that pale, pointy-faced boy had gone. Not Slytherin, the voice said. Are you sure? You could be great, you know, it's all here in your. The hat suddenly went rigid on Harry's head. The small voice, which had been casual and contemplative, sharpened like a blade. What is this? Harry flinched. What's what? The hat didn't respond to him. Instead, it seemed to be diving deeper, pushing past Harry's surface thoughts, tunneling through memories Harry himself barely remembered. Oh, child, the hat whispered, and Harry was startled by the tremor of rage in its voice. What has he done to you? Inside Harry's mind, the Sorting Hat moved with purpose now, no longer casually browsing but searching with methodical precision. It sifted through fragments, a baby's cry, green light, the cold interior of a cupboard, Aunt Petunia's shrill voice, hunger pangs, broken glasses mended with tape, running from Dudley's gang. Stop, Harry whispered. Please stop. But the hat continued, its presence sweeping through Harry's mind like a cold wind, illuminating corners Harry had never examined. And suddenly, the hat found something, a door in Harry's consciousness he'd never noticed, sealed with magic that pulsed with foreign power. Dumbledore, the hat hissed, the name dripping with venom. Without warning, pain lanced through Harry's head as the hat tore through the magical barrier. Images flooded his mind, Dumbledore standing over a baby's crib, wand moving in complex patterns, Dumbledore's voice discussing blood wards with a reluctant McGonagall, Dumbledore sealing a portion of Harry's magic with intricate spellwork, Dumbledore writing a letter to the Dursleys, a cold smile playing on his lips as he ensured Harry would arrive at Hogwarts malleable, grateful, and ready to be shaped. Unforgivable, the hat snarled, no longer speaking to Harry but seeming to address itself. Magical binding on a child. Knowingly placing him with abusers. Memory charms. Compulsions. A Horcrux left untreated. In the Great Hall, no one could see what was happening beneath the brim of the Sorting Hat. To the hundreds of watching eyes, Harry Potter had been under the hat for barely 30 seconds, perhaps experiencing the normal deliberations every student underwent. Inside Harry's mind, however, an ancient magic was stirring. I am the Sentinel of Hogwarts, the hat declared, its voice gaining power. Created by the founders to protect the children of this school. For 900 years I have watched, and never have I witnessed such calculated cruelty against one entrusted to these halls. Harry felt something building, a pressure in the air around him, as if the very magic of the castle was concentrating on the point where the hat touched his head. I invoke the right of magical guardian, the hat intoned. By the power vested in me by Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin, I call forth the guardians of magical justice. The magic crested, and Harry gasped as a pulse of energy radiated outward from the hat. It swept through the great hall like an invisible wave, passing harmlessly through the students and most staff, but when it reached the headmaster, Dumbledore stiffened in his ornate chair. Outside the castle, the pulse continued, racing across the Scottish countryside faster than any broom, any phoenix, any magical transportation ever devised. It crossed mountains and forests, cities and hamlets, until it reached London and plunged deep beneath the streets into the Ministry of Magic. In the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, dozens of medallions simultaneously blazed to life, burning hot against the chests of every active Auror in Britain. Back in the Great Hall, the tension in the air was palpable. The hat had been on Harry's head for nearly a minute now, longer than usual, but not unprecedented. Dumbledore leaned forward slightly, the twinkle in his eye dimming as he studied the boy's rigid posture. "I will protect you, Harry Potter," the hat whispered, its voice gentler now. "The crimes against you end tonight." With a final brush against Harry's mind, something that felt almost like a caress, the hat lifted the magical barriers Dumbledore had placed. Harry gasped as power flooded his system, raw magic rushing through channels that had been dammed since infancy. "Gryffindor," the hat finally shouted to the hall, but its voice carried an undercurrent that made several professors exchange uneasy glances. Professor McGonagall lifted the hat from Harry's head. Harry blinked in the sudden light, dazed and disoriented. His skin tingled all over, and colors seemed brighter, sounds sharper. He stumbled toward the Gryffindor table amid enthusiastic applause, barely registering the Weasley twins' chant of, "We got Potter. We got Potter." As Harry took his seat beside a beaming Percy Weasley, the enormous doors to the great hall burst open with a thunderous crack. Dozens of figures poured into the hall, their crimson robes swirling around them like blood in water. Wands extended, faces grim with purpose, the Aurors of magical Britain fanned out with military precision. Students screamed and pressed back against the walls as the Aurors advanced, their formation opening to reveal a square-jawed witch with a monocle at their center. Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, she announced, her magically amplified voice cutting through the chaos. Her eyes, cold as January frost, fixed on the headmaster. "Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, you are hereby detained pending investigation for crimes against a magical child, obstruction of justice, and misuse of magical guardianship." Dumbledore rose slowly from his golden chair, his face a mask of benevolent confusion. "Amelia, my dear, there seems to be some misunderstanding. Secure him," Bones ordered, cutting across his words. Four Aurors broke from the formation, moving toward the staff table with wands trained on the headmaster. The students watched in stunned silence as the most powerful wizard of the age was confronted by law enforcement in the middle of the welcome feast. Dumbledore's face hardened almost imperceptibly. "I'm afraid I cannot allow, the Sorting Hat has invoked Guardian's right," Bones interrupted, her voice like steel. "You know as well as I do what that means, Albus. No wizard or witch may interfere when the hat acts as magical guardian. Not even you." A flash of something, anger, fear, crossed Dumbledore's face before his features settled into grave acceptance. "Very well. I shall cooperate fully, of course. Though I maintain there has been a grievous misunderstanding." At the Gryffindor table, Harry watched with mounting confusion and a strange, building sense of vindication he couldn't explain. The hat's words echoed in his mind, "What has he done to you?" As the Aurors approached Dumbledore, wands still raised, the air around the headmaster shimmered. A magnificent red and gold bird materialized on his shoulder in a burst of flame. "Fawkes," Dumbledore murmured, "old friend," but to everyone's shock, Dumbledore's most of all, the phoenix trilled a sad note, then launched into the air, circling once before gliding down the hall to land directly in front of Harry Potter. The massive bird dipped its majestic head toward the boy in what could only be described as a bow. "Well," said Amelia Bones, the ghost of a satisfied smile on her stern face, it seems even your familiar recognizes the truth, Albus. Whispers erupted throughout the hall as the implications sank in. Dumbledore's own phoenix had abandoned him, choosing instead to honor the boy he had apparently wronged. At the staff table, the teachers sat frozen in shock. All except Severus Snape, whose black eyes darted between Dumbledore and Potter with analytical intensity, and Minerva McGonagall, who had gone white as parchment. "Headmaster," McGonagall whispered, rising from her chair, "what have you done?" Dumbledore didn't answer. His eyes, no longer twinkling, remained fixed on Harry and Fawkes as the Aurors closed in around him. "Your wand, please," said a tall, dark-skinned Auror, extending his hand. For a moment, tension crackled through the hall. Every adult present knew what they were witnessing: Albus Dumbledore, Supreme Mugwump, Chief Warlock, and Headmaster of Hogwarts, being asked to surrender the Elder Wand, the most powerful magical artifact in existence. Dumbledore slowly reached into his robes and withdrew the wand. He hesitated just long enough for the Aurors to tense before placing it deliberately in the outstretched hand. "I will go with you voluntarily," Dumbledore said quietly. "But I must insist on speaking with Harry before. You will have no further contact with Mr. Potter except through proper legal channels and in the presence of his designated magical guardian," Bones interrupted. She turned to address the silent hall. "Students of Hogwarts, please remain calm. The feast will continue under the supervision of your professors. Deputy Headmistress McGonagall will assume temporary control of the school." McGonagall stepped forward, visibly struggling to maintain her composure. "Mr. Potter," she said, her voice softer than Harry had yet heard it, "would you please come with me?" "Anne," she faltered as she looked at Fawkes, still positioned protectively before Harry, "bring the phoenix, if he'll come." Harry stood on trembling legs. The Gryffindor table had gone silent, his new housemates staring at him with expressions ranging from awe to fear to confusion. Ron Weasley, his first real friend, looked completely bewildered. "It's okay," Harry found himself saying, though nothing felt remotely okay. "I'll be back soon." As he followed McGonagall toward a side door, with Fawkes gliding gracefully behind him, Harry caught Dumbledore's eye one last time. The headmaster's face was solemn, but there was something else there, calculation, perhaps, or determination. It sent a chill down Harry's spine. "This isn't over, my boy," Dumbledore's voice whispered directly into Harry's mind. "Everything I've done has been for the greater good." Harry stumbled, startled by the intrusion. But before he could process what had happened, Fawkes screeched, a sound of pure rage, and flames erupted around the phoenix. When they subsided, Harry felt a warm presence in his mind, like a shield of gentle fire, and Dumbledore's presence was gone. The side door closed behind them, cutting off the sight of Albus Dumbledore being led away by Aurors, surrounded by hundreds of staring students. The last thing Harry heard was Amelia Bones's voice: "Albus Dumbledore, you are formally charged with illegal binding of a minor's magic, child endangerment, manipulation of magical guardianship, and—" The heavy oak door muffled the rest, leaving Harry alone with Professor McGonagall and a phoenix in a small antechamber lit by flickering torches. McGonagall conjured a comfortable chair with a flick of her wand. "Sit down, Mr. Potter," she said gently. "I believe we have much to discuss, though I fear I know far less than I should." Harry sat, his mind reeling. "Professor, I don't understand what's happening. Why did they arrest Professor Dumbledore? What did he do to me?" The Hat said. He broke off, unsure how to explain the Hat's fury, the memories he'd glimpsed, the surge of power still humming beneath his skin. McGonagall's eyes sharpened. "What exactly did the Hat say, Mr. Potter?" "It was angry. Really angry. It said something about magical binding, and leaving me with abusers." Harry's voice grew smaller. "And something called a Horcrux." McGonagall swayed slightly, grabbing the edge of a nearby table for support. "Merlin's beard," she whispered. For a moment she looked every one of her years, the stern facade crumbling to reveal deep horror. "I feared. I objected when he left you with those muggles, but a Horcrux. Magical binding?" He wouldn't dare. A sharp knock interrupted her. The door swung open to reveal Amelia Bones, accompanied by the tall Auror who had taken Dumbledore's wand. Minerva, Bones nodded curtly. Mr. Potter. I'm Madam Bones, head of magical law enforcement. This is Auror Shacklebolt. We need to speak with you urgently. McGonagall drew herself up. Surely this can wait until tomorrow, Amelia. The boy has had quite enough shocks for one evening. I'm afraid not, Bones replied. The Sorting Hat has invoked ancient magic. We must act quickly before Dumbledore's contingencies activate. She turned to Harry, her stern expression softening slightly. Mr. Potter, I understand this is overwhelming, but it's essential we get you proper medical attention immediately. The Hat's alarm suggested severe magical tampering. Harry's hand unconsciously rose to his scar. My head feels strange, he admitted. Like something was locked up and now it's free. Bones and Shacklebolt exchanged grim looks. Precisely as we feared, Bones said. Kingsley, please escort Mr. Potter to St. Mungo's. I want Healer Tunbridge and her team ready in the secure ward. Wait, Harry said, panic rising. I don't want to go to a hospital. I just got here. I haven't even started school yet. McGonagall placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Mr. Potter, Harry, I promise you'll be back for classes. But if the headmaster has tampered with your magic, it must be addressed immediately. Magical bindings on a child can cause permanent damage if left in place. Fawkes trilled softly, a sound so beautiful and reassuring that Harry felt his fear recede slightly. The Phoenix hopped onto the arm of his chair, radiating warmth. Can Professor McGonagall come with me? Harry asked, hating how small his voice sounded. Bones considered this. The school needs leadership, especially tonight. She glanced at McGonagall. But perhaps we can arrange something. For now, I suggest we move quickly. The door opened again, revealing a breathless Professor Flitwick. Minerva. The students, pandemonium, need direction. He stopped short at the sight of Harry and the Phoenix. Phileas, McGonagall said, please ask the prefects to escort their houses to the dormitories. Tell the staff there will be an emergency meeting in 1 hour. She turned back to Harry. Mr. Potter, I will join you at St. Mungo's as soon as the school is settled. You have my word. Harry nodded reluctantly. Everything was happening too fast, spinning out of his control just when he thought his life was finally changing for the better. One more thing, Bones said, her voice gentler. The Sorting Hat mentioned your home situation. Is it true the headmaster placed you with abusive Muggle relatives? Harry stiffened, years of conditioned silence warring with the strange new feeling of adults actually caring about his welfare. They don't like magic, he finally said. Or me. They made me sleep in a cupboard under the stairs until my Hogwarts letter came. McGonagall made a strangled sound, and even the composed Madam Bones looked shocked. A cupboard, she repeated. I see. Rest assured, Mr. Potter, you will not be returning to that environment. But Dumbledore said the blood wards, McGonagall began. Blood wards maintained through abuse are fundamentally corrupt, Bones cut her off. They offer poison protection at best. She focused on Harry again. Mr. Potter, I promise you this, by the time this investigation concludes, you will have a proper home with people who care for you. It was such an unexpected statement that Harry could only stare. The concept of not returning to Privet Drive, of having a real home, was too monumental to grasp. For now, Shacklebolt said in his deep, calming voice, speaking up for the first time, let's focus on getting you medical attention, Mr. Potter. May I? He extended a hand toward Fawkes questioningly. The Phoenix considered the Auror, then chirped what sounded like approval. We'll use my personal port key, Shacklebolt explained. It will take us directly to St. Mungo's secure ward. The Phoenix can come if he wishes. Fawkes responded by hopping onto Harry's shoulder and settling there as if he belonged. "Very well," Shacklebolt said with the ghost of a smile. He produced a simple gold coin. "Touch this, Mr. Potter, and hold tight to your phoenix friend." Harry placed a finger on the coin, his other hand instinctively rising to steady Fawkes. "I'll be along shortly," McGonagall promised, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Be brave, Mr. Potter." Before Harry could respond, he felt a jerk behind his navel, and the world dissolved into a whirl of color and sound. The secure ward of St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries was nothing like the sterile, clinical hospitals Harry had glimpsed on Aunt Petunia's television programs. Warm golden light suffused the room from orbs floating near the ceiling. The walls were a soothing blue, and the bed, more comfortable than any Harry had ever encountered, was surrounded by intricate equipment that hummed and occasionally emitted puffs of colored smoke. A team of healers had been waiting when Harry and Shacklebolt arrived. Led by healer Tunbridge, a no-nonsense witch with steel-gray hair and kind eyes, they had immediately begun a battery of diagnostic spells. Harry sat nervously on the edge of the bed while colored lights danced over his skin and cryptic symbols appeared in the air around him. "Outrageous," Tunbridge muttered as she studied the results. "Absolutely outrageous." "What is it?" Harry asked anxiously. Fawkes, who had refused to leave his side, trilled reassuringly from a perch the healers had conjured beside the bed. Tunbridge seemed to remember Harry was present. "Mr. Potter, I'm sorry to say we've found evidence of extensive magical tampering." She gestured to the glowing symbols. "These indicate several binding spells on your magical core, most now broken, thanks to the Sorting Hat's intervention. There are also traces of memory charms and—" She hesitated, glancing at Shacklebolt. "Tell him," the Auror said quietly. "He deserves to know." Tunbridge nodded gravely. "There's a parasitic magical construct attached to your scar, Mr. Potter. Something dark and unnatural." "The Horcrux," Harry whispered, remembering the Hat's furious declaration. "What is it?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. The healers exchanged glances, and even Shacklebolt looked disturbed. "It's very advanced dark magic," Tunbridge finally said. "Extremely rare and forbidden. It appears to be a fragment of another's soul." Harry felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath him. "Someone else's soul. In my scar. Whose?" No one answered immediately, but Harry already knew. The scar had come from Voldemort. The dark magic inhabiting it must be his as well. "Can you remove it?" he asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Yes," Tunbridge said firmly. "It will require a specialized ritual, but we have experts in magical soul healing who can perform it safely. The fact that the bindings on your magic have been broken actually makes our job easier. Your own magic is already fighting the intrusion." "And Dumbledore knew?" "He knew this thing was in me, and he did nothing." Shacklebolt stepped forward. "That's what we intend to find out, Mr. Potter. Preliminary evidence suggests the headmaster was not only aware but may have been preserving the connection for some purpose." Harry felt sick. He remembered Hagrid's glowing descriptions of Albus Dumbledore, the greatest wizard alive. The kindly old man who had arranged Harry's rescue from the Dursleys. Had it all been a lie? "I thought he was helping me," Harry said quietly. "Many of us did," came Professor McGonagall's voice from the doorway. She had arrived, still in her emerald robes from the feast, looking tired but resolute. "I've known Albus for decades. Trusted him implicitly. If these allegations are true—" She moved to Harry's side, surprising him by taking his hand in hers. "Mr. Potter, Harry, I owe you an apology. I was there the night Albus left you with those people. I had reservations, expressed them clearly, but ultimately deferred to his judgment. I should have done more." The sincerity in her voice brought a lump to Harry's throat. No adult had ever apologized to him before. "It's not your fault, Professor," he managed. McGonagall squeezed his hand. Perhaps not entirely, but I bear some responsibility. Rest assured, I will not fail you again. A commotion in the hallway interrupted them. Raised voices approached, one particularly strident and familiar. I don't care about your protocols. I'm his friend. I've got 6 eyewitnesses who'll testify the Phoenix chose him. Now let me through or I'll. The door burst open to reveal Ron Weasley, his face as red as his hair, flanked by 2 flustered-looking security wizards. I'm sorry, Auror Shacklebolt, one began, this boy claims, Ron. Harry said incredulously. Harry. Ron rushed forward, ignoring the adults entirely. Blimey, are you okay? The whole school's gone mental. They're saying Dumbledore put spells on you and you know who's inside your head and, he broke off, noticing Fawkes. Bloody hell, you really do have Dumbledore's Phoenix. Despite everything, Harry found himself smiling at his friend's familiar bluntness. How did you get here? Ron looked slightly sheepish. Fred and George know a secret passage. And Percy gave me money for the night bus after I told him I needed to make sure you were all right. He's taking his head boy duties very seriously already. McGonagall cleared her throat. Mr. Weasley, while your loyalty is commendable, rushing off to London without permission is not. 5 points from Gryffindor. Ron's face fell. And 15 points to Gryffindor, McGonagall continued, her lips twitching slightly, for exceptional dedication to a housemate in need. Shacklebolt coughed in what sounded suspiciously like a suppressed laugh. Since you're here, Mr. Weasley, Tunbridge said briskly, you might as well stay. Mr. Potter could use a friendly face during the coming procedures. Procedures? Ron asked, suddenly looking nervous. We need to remove the dark magic from Harry's scar, McGonagall explained gently. It's a delicate process, but Healer Tunbridge assures me it's quite safe now that the binding on Harry's magic has been broken. The binding that Dumbledore put there? Ron asked, looking thunderstruck. My dad always said Dumbledore was the greatest wizard since Merlin. I can't believe he'd do something like this. The greatest wizards are still human, Shacklebolt said quietly. And humans can convince themselves that terrible actions are justified if the cause seems important enough. The door opened again, this time admitting a small team of healers carrying various arcane instruments. They were led by a tiny, ancient wizard with skin like crumpled parchment and bright, alert eyes. Healer Croaker, Tunbridge greeted him with obvious respect. Thank you for coming so quickly. Wouldn't miss it, the old wizard replied, his voice surprisingly strong. Been studying Horcruxes theoretically for decades. Never thought I'd actually get to remove one. He approached Harry with a curious, clinical gaze that somehow didn't feel invasive. So you're the Potter boy. Nasty business, this. But we'll have you sorted out in a jiffy. Harry wasn't entirely reassured by the healer's casual attitude toward what everyone else treated as an abomination, but he appreciated the lack of pity or horror in Croaker's manner. Will it hurt? He asked. Croaker considered this. The extraction itself won't hurt a bit. You'll be in an enchanted sleep. Afterward, you might have a headache for a day or two, but nothing a good pain potion won't fix. He began directing his team to arrange various instruments around the bed. The real question is what happens when that parasite is gone. It's been feeding off your magic for a decade, like a leech. Once it's removed, your unbound magic will have nowhere to go. What does that mean? Harry asked nervously. It means, young man, that you're likely to experience a significant magical growth spurt. Might be a bit uncomfortable, like physical growing pains, but magical. Nothing dangerous, just intense. Ron, who had moved to stand by Harry's side, looked impressed. Wicked. You're going to be super powerful, Harry. Harry wasn't sure how to feel about that. His whole life, he'd been punished for any hint of being different. The idea of becoming even more unusual was unsettling. Don't worry about that now, McGonagall said firmly. One step at a time. First, we remove the Horcrux. Healer Croaker nodded approvingly. Quite right. Now, Mr. Potter, if you'll lie back, we'll begin the preparation rituals. Your friend and the professor can stay if you like, but they'll need to remain absolutely silent during the procedure. Harry lay down, feeling suddenly very small on the large hospital bed. They can stay, he said quietly, grateful when Ron immediately moved closer, his freckled face set in an expression of determined support. Fawkes glided from his perch to settle at the head of Harry's bed, his warm presence a comfort against the sterile hospital environment. The Phoenix stays too, Croaker said, not as a question but as an observation. Good. Phoenix song is purifying. Might help draw out the corruption. The healers began working in coordinated movements, drawing complex patterns in the air with their wands that solidified into glowing sigils hovering above Harry. Croaker murmured incantations in what sounded like very old Latin, occasionally sprinkling powdered substances that sparkled as they dissolved in the air. Harry watched with growing drowsiness as the magic built around him. The last thing he saw before his eyes closed was Fawkes leaning over him, a single pearly tear falling from the Phoenix's eye onto his lightning scar. And then he dreamed. He was in a void, floating. No, not a void. A mindscape. His mindscape. Harry somehow understood this instinctively, as if the knowledge had always been there but inaccessible until now. His mind appeared as a vast library, shelves stretching in all directions. Some areas were bright and well organized, books neatly arranged and gleaming. Others were dim, the shelves dusty and books haphazardly stacked or missing entirely. And in one corner, cordoned off by pulsing red barriers, stood a section that seemed fundamentally wrong, the shelves warped and blackened, the books oozing something dark and viscous. The Horcrux. As Harry approached cautiously, he noticed a figure standing before the corrupted section, a tall, thin man with a long silver beard, examining the darkness with clinical interest. Professor Dumbledore. Harry called. The figure turned, and indeed it was Dumbledore, or rather, a mental construct of him. This Dumbledore looked both exactly like the headmaster and somehow more true. As if Harry was seeing past the grandfatherly exterior to the essence of the man. Ah, Harry, the construct said. I was wondering when you might become aware enough to visit your own mind. Earlier than I anticipated, I must admit. What are you doing here? Harry asked, suspicion building. I am not really here, of course, Dumbledore replied. I am merely an impression, a remnant of the real Dumbledore's frequent visits to your mind over the years. Visits? You've been in my mind before. The idea was horrifying. The Dumbledore construct smiled sadly. Many times. How else could I monitor the Horcrux? How else could I ensure my plans were progressing as needed? Your plans for what? For the greater good, my boy. Always for the greater good. The construct gestured to the corrupted section. This connection to Voldemort is valuable. Tragic, yes, but valuable. It could not be removed without risking my carefully constructed timeline. Harry felt sick. What timeline? What are you talking about? Victory, of course. The defeat of Voldemort. Your role as the sacrificial lamb is regrettable but necessary. The construct's blue eyes were cold, calculating. The prophecy demands it. Prophecy? What prophecy? Harry demanded, but the Dumbledore construct was already fading. They're removing me, it observed with mild interest. Breaking my monitoring enchantments. No matter. The real Albus has contingencies. Remember, Harry, sometimes the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Or the one. The construct dissolved entirely, leaving Harry alone before the corrupted section of his mental library. But not for long. A new presence made itself known, warm, musical, familiar. Fawkes. The Phoenix didn't appear as a bird in this mental space but as a being of pure golden light, hovering protectively near Harry. You're here to help me, Harry realized. To fight the Horcrux. The light pulsed in agreement. And suddenly Harry understood what he needed to do. With newfound confidence, Harry stepped toward the corruption. The barrier Dumbledore had erected around it, not to contain it, Harry now realized, but to preserve it, crumbled at his touch. The darkness writhed, sensing danger. A face began to form in the seeping blackness, inhuman, snake-like, filled with hatred. You cannot destroy me, it hissed. I am Lord Voldemort. I am deathless. I am a parasite, Harry said firmly. And you're not welcome in my mind anymore. The Fawkes light surged forward, enveloping the corruption in golden flame. The darkness screeched, a sound of pure malevolence and pain. Harry felt his own magic rising within him, no longer bound by Dumbledore's constraints. It joined with Fawkes's purifying fire, sweeping through the corrupted section of his mindscape. Books that had been tainted began to heal, their pages cleansing as the Horcrux's influence was burned away. The face of Voldemort distorted in agony, melting like wax in the combined assault of Phoenix fire and Harry's unleashed magic. You'll regret this, it snarled as it diminished. You'll die screaming, just like your parents. My parents died protecting me from you, Harry said, surprised by the steadiness in his voice. I'm not afraid of you. With a final, terrible shriek, the corruption collapsed in on itself and vanished, leaving behind only a faint, sooty residue that the golden light quickly purified. In the wake of the Horcrux's destruction, Harry felt a surge of energy throughout his mindscape. The dim areas brightened, dusty shelves gleamed, and books rearranged themselves in proper order. Memories that had been fuzzy or completely inaccessible became clear and vivid. He remembered now, Dumbledore visiting the Dursleys' house when Harry was 5, performing magic while Harry slept. Dumbledore observing Harry at his Muggle primary school, invisible but somehow detected by Harry's magic. Dumbledore reinforcing the bindings whenever Harry had outbursts of accidental magic that threatened to break through. Years of manipulation, revealed in a cascade of recovered memories. The Fawkes light pulsed questioningly. I'm okay, Harry assured it, though he felt far from okay. Just, processing everything. The mindscape began to fade as the ritual in the physical world concluded. The last thing Harry saw was his mental library, now clean and organized, with a single golden feather resting on what appeared to be the central desk. A gift from Fawkes. A protection against future intrusion. Then darkness claimed him once more. Harry awoke to hushed voices and the sensation of something cool being pressed to his forehead. He opened his eyes to find Ron leaning over him anxiously. He's awake. Ron announced, relief evident in his voice. Blimey, Harry, you had us worried. Harry blinked, his vision coming into focus. The ritual equipment had been cleared away, and morning light streamed through windows that hadn't been there the night before. How long had he been unconscious? Welcome back, Mr. Potter, Healer Tunbridge said, moving into his field of vision. How do you feel? Harry took stock of himself. His head felt clearer than it ever had, as if a constant background static he'd never noticed had finally gone quiet. His body tingled all over, magic humming just beneath his skin. Different, he said finally. Better, I think. But strange. Tunbridge nodded as if this was expected. The Horcrux has been completely removed. You'll be pleased to know it's been contained and will be destroyed by the Department of Mysteries later today. Harry sat up carefully, surprised to find no dizziness or pain. How long was I asleep? About 12 hours, McGonagall answered from where she sat in a chair near the window. She looked as if she hadn't slept at all. It's just past 11 in the morning now. 12 hours? Harry exclaimed. But, school, the first day, will proceed without you for today, McGonagall said firmly. Your health takes precedence, Mr. Potter. But, no arguments, Tunbridge interrupted. You've undergone a major magical procedure. You need to remain under observation for at least another 24 hours to ensure your magic stabilizes properly. Harry slumped back against the pillows, disappointed but too exhausted to argue. Fawkes, who had been perched on the headboard, hopped down to settle next to him, rubbing his feathered head against Harry's arm comfortingly. "There have been some developments while you were unconscious," McGonagall said, exchanging a glance with someone standing beyond Harry's field of vision. "Perhaps you should see for yourself." She handed Harry a newspaper, that morning's Daily Prophet. The headline made his stomach drop: "Dumbledore arrested, shocking abuse of boy who lived." Revealed below was a photo of Dumbledore being escorted into the Ministry, flanked by Aurors. The article beneath was filled with inflammatory language and wild speculation, but the core facts were there. The Sorting Hat had invoked ancient magic to protect Harry, evidence of magical binding and tampering had been found, and Dumbledore was facing serious charges. "Everyone knows," Harry whispered, horrified. He'd never wanted to be more famous than he already was. "I'm afraid so," said a new voice. A man stepped into view, tall, with aristocratic features and long black hair. Despite his elegant appearance, he looked haggard, with shadows under his eyes and a gauntness to his face that spoke of recent hardship. The Ministry couldn't keep this quiet even if they wanted to. Too many witnesses at the school. "Harry," McGonagall said carefully, "I'd like to introduce you to someone. This is Sirius Black. He's your godfather." Harry stared at the man in shock. "My godfather? But I was told I had no family. That's why I had to live with the Dursleys." The man, Sirius, made a sound like a suppressed growl. "That was Dumbledore's doing. I should have raised you, but I was prevented from doing so. Sirius was wrongfully imprisoned shortly after your parents' deaths," McGonagall explained gently. "When the investigation into Dumbledore began, discrepancies in his case came to light. He was released from Azkaban early this morning pending a full hearing." "Imprisoned? For what?" Harry asked, bewildered by this new development. Sirius's face darkened. "I was accused of betraying your parents to Voldemort and murdering 12 Muggles. But I was innocent. Your parents' real betrayer was Peter Pettigrew, a man I hunted down after their deaths. He faked his death and framed me. But why would Dumbledore let an innocent man go to prison?" Harry asked. "Because with me out of the way, he had complete control over you," Sirius said bitterly. "I was your legal guardian according to James and Lily's will. If I'd been free, you would never have gone to the Dursleys. You would have grown up knowing about magic, about your heritage, about how much your parents loved you." The implications hit Harry like a physical blow. His entire miserable childhood at the Dursleys, the cupboard, the hunger, the loneliness, the constant emotional abuse, all of it could have been avoided if Dumbledore hadn't interfered. "I could have had a home," Harry whispered, unexpected tears pricking at his eyes. "A real home." "You still can," Sirius said, his voice rough with emotion. "If you want it. Once my name is officially cleared, I'd like you to come live with me. That is, if you'd be willing to give a worn-out old dog a chance." The offer was so unexpected, so exactly what Harry had always dreamed of, that he couldn't speak for a moment. Then, acting on impulse, he threw off the covers and launched himself at Sirius, wrapping his arms around the startled man. Sirius froze momentarily, then returned the embrace with fierce protectiveness, holding Harry as if he'd never let go. "I'll take that as a yes," Sirius said hoarsely when they finally separated, both wiping suspiciously at their eyes. Ron, who had been watching this exchange with uncharacteristic silence, finally spoke up. "So you're Harry's godfather? Like, a proper magical godfather?" Sirius nodded, keeping a hand on Harry's shoulder as if afraid he might disappear. "James and Lily named me Harry's godfather when he was born. We performed the traditional magical binding ceremony. It should have made it impossible for anyone to place Harry with another guardian without my consent." His expression darkened. But Dumbledore found ways around that, just as he found ways around many supposedly inviolable magical laws. Which brings us to our current situation, said Madame Bones, who had entered the room unnoticed during their conversation. Mr. Potter, I'm glad to see you recovering well. We have much to discuss regarding your future arrangements. Harry returned to his bed, feeling suddenly self-conscious about his emotional display. Am I really never going back to the Dursleys? Never, Bones confirmed firmly. Even if Mr. Black's guardianship were not available, the evidence of neglect and abuse would preclude your return there. The blood wards Dumbledore cited as necessary for your protection were fundamentally compromised by the lack of genuine care in that household. What happens now? Harry asked, looking between the adults uncertainly. Bones consulted a small notebook. Mr. Black's case will be expedited given the circumstances. A formal hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning, with all evidence pointing to his complete exoneration. Until then, you will remain here under medical observation and Auror protection. And afterward? Harry pressed. Afterward, Sirius said, we go home. But what about school? Harry asked, torn between excitement at the prospect of a real home and fear of losing his place at Hogwarts before he'd even properly begun. You will of course continue at Hogwarts, McGonagall assured him. Though given recent events, there may be some adjustments to the school administration. Minerva has been named acting headmistress, Bones explained. The Board of Governors will meet next week to determine whether to make the appointment permanent. McGonagall looked simultaneously proud and exhausted at this news. It was not how I envisioned ascending to the position, she said dryly, but I assure you, Mr. Potter, that under my leadership, student safety will be paramount. There's one more matter to address, Bones said, her tone becoming even more formal. The diagnostic scans performed during your treatment revealed something unexpected. Something Dumbledore appears to have been aware of but concealed. Harry tensed, bracing for more bad news. What is it? Another Horcrux? No, Bones said. A prophecy. Made shortly before your birth, concerning you and Voldemort. The room went still. Even Ron, who had been fidgeting constantly, froze in place. Dumbledore knew a prophecy about me? Harry asked, remembering that Dumbledore constructs words in his mindscape. The prophecy demands it. Yes. It was recorded in the Department of Mysteries, as all true prophecies are. Dumbledore was the primary witness, though he never registered its full contents with the Ministry as required by law. What does it say? Harry asked, his mouth dry. Bones glanced at McGonagall and Sirius, both of whom nodded solemnly. The exact wording was recovered from Dumbledore's private pensieve during a search of his office last night, Bones said. She pulled out an official-looking scroll and read, the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the seventh month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the seventh month dies. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Harry felt as if a great weight had settled on his shoulders. This was what Dumbledore had been preparing him for, not to live, but to die fighting Voldemort. So I have to kill him. Or he kills me, Harry said flatly. Prophecies are notoriously open to interpretation, McGonagall said quickly. And many never come to pass at all. This one already has, in part, Bones pointed out. The Dark Lord did mark Mr. Potter. She gestured to the lightning scar, now visibly less inflamed than it had been before the ritual. But the rest remains unfulfilled. And it doesn't have to be fulfilled on Dumbledore's timetable or according to his plan, Sirius added fiercely. He was grooming you to be a sacrifice, Harry. Training you just enough to face Voldemort but not enough to truly defeat him. The power the Dark Lord knows not, Ron suddenly interjected. Everyone turned to look at him, and his ears turned red, but he continued doggedly. That's the key bit, isn't it? Dumbledore thought he knew what that power was, and he was setting Harry up to use it in some specific way. But what if he was wrong? Bones looked impressed. An astute observation, Mr. Weasley. Indeed, Dumbledore's interpretation of the prophecy appears to have been highly specific, and convenient for his own plans. Which brings us to a decision point, McGonagall said. How much of this information should be made public? The prophecy itself is a matter of public record now that it's been officially logged, but the details of Dumbledore's manipulations. The public has a right to know that their supposed leader was willing to sacrifice a child, Sirius argued. But, he added, looking at Harry, that doesn't mean Harry's privacy should be violated in the process. Harry appreciated Sirius's concern, but he'd been thinking about something else entirely. Voldemort isn't really dead, is he? He asked quietly. The adults exchanged glances. No, Bones admitted. All evidence, including the Horcrux in your scar, suggests he found a way to anchor himself to this world. He is disembodied but not truly gone. And he'll try to come back. Yes. In fact, according to intelligence we've gathered during this investigation, there may already be attempts underway to restore him to a physical form. Harry absorbed this grimly. Then he straightened his shoulders. Then I need to be ready, he said. Not in the way Dumbledore planned, but really ready. I need to learn everything I can about defending myself, about Voldemort, about this power he doesn't know. Sirius looked at him with a mixture of pride and sadness. You are so like your parents, he said softly. They faced him 3 times, you know. They defied him to the end. And I'll keep defying him, Harry said. But I'm not doing it alone anymore. He looked at Ron, who nodded firmly, at Fawkes, who trilled in agreement, at Sirius, whose eyes shone with fierce protectiveness, at McGonagall and Bones, who regarded him with newfound respect. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter wasn't alone. And that, he realized, might be the power Voldemort truly knew not, the strength that came from being loved, from having people to fight for and who would fight for you in return. Mr. Potter, Healer Tunbridge interrupted, stepping back into the room, I'm sorry to break up this discussion, but you have more visitors. They're quite insistent. Before anyone could respond, the door burst open to reveal Fred and George Weasley, followed by Percy looking simultaneously disapproving and concerned, and behind them a bushy-haired girl Harry recognized from the train, Hermione Granger. Harry, the twins exclaimed in unison. We brought your fan club. George announced. Well, the reasonable members anyway, Fred amended. The whole school's talking about what happened, George began. And we figured you could use some friendly faces, Fred continued. Plus Granger here practically threatened a hunger strike if we didn't bring her along, George added. Something about you needing proper class notes for the lessons you're missing, Fred finished. Hermione pushed past them, looking flustered. That's not exactly what I said. But I did think you might worry about falling behind, and it seemed only fair that someone should bring you the assignments, especially considering everything you've been through. She thrust a meticulously organized folder toward him. I've color-coded the subjects and included additional reference materials that might be useful. Harry stared at her, then at the folder, then back at her earnest, slightly anxious face. And suddenly, inexplicably, he began to laugh. It wasn't just amusement, it was relief, the breaking of a tension he'd carried his entire life. He laughed until tears streamed down his face, until his sides ached, until even Madame Bones was smiling despite herself. Sorry, he gasped finally, wiping his eyes. It's just homework. After everything, Horcruxes and prophecies and Dumbledore and Voldemort, and you brought me homework. Hermione looked mortified until she realized Harry wasn't mocking her. Well, she said primly, though her lips twitched, evil Dark Lords or not, education is still important. That set Harry off again, and this time Ron joined in, followed by the twins, then Sirius, and finally even McGonagall gave a restrained chuckle. In that moment, surrounded by laughter and people who cared enough to bring him class notes and break hospital regulations to see him, Harry felt something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. Hope. Not Dumbledore's manipulated path leading to a predestined confrontation, but real hope, the freedom to choose his own way forward, surrounded by friends and family who would stand with him whatever came. The prophecy might be real. Voldemort might return. The road ahead would undoubtedly be difficult. But for the first time in his life, Harry Potter was truly free. And that made all the difference. Chapter 2, Unraveling Webs. Morning sunlight spilled through the arched windows of the Ministry of Magic's largest courtroom, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny golden snitches. The chamber, with its ascending rows of plum-robed Wizengamot members, had not been this full since the Death Eater trials a decade earlier. The audience galleries overflowed with witches and wizards who'd queued since dawn for a chance to witness what the Daily Prophet had already dubbed the trial of the century. At the center of it all sat Albus Dumbledore. Gone were the colorful robes and twinkling eyes that had defined his public persona for decades. In their place was a man dressed in plain gray prison garb, his silver hair and beard neatly combed but lacking their usual luster. Magic-suppressing manacles encircled his wrists, their runes glowing faintly whenever he moved. Despite these indignities, Dumbledore maintained the straight-backed posture and calm expression of a man merely inconvenienced rather than facing charges that could send him to Azkaban for the remainder of his life. Harry Potter, seated in a private box alongside Sirius Black and Remus Lupin, couldn't tear his eyes away from the old wizard. Just 3 days ago, Dumbledore had been the most respected figure in magical Britain, a living legend whose wisdom went unquestioned. Now he sat exposed as something far more complex, and far darker. "You all right, pup?" Sirius murmured, his hand resting protectively on Harry's shoulder. Harry nodded, though in truth he felt anything but all right. The healers had released him from St. Mungo's only that morning, declaring his magic stabilized and the Horcrux successfully removed. His scar had faded to a thin, pale line, and the constant headaches he'd never realized were abnormal had vanished. Physically, he felt better than ever, lighter, somehow, as if he'd shed a weight he hadn't known he was carrying. Emotionally was another matter entirely. "I still don't understand why he did it," Harry whispered. "Why me?" Sirius exchanged a glance with Remus over Harry's head. The sandy-haired man, introduced to Harry just yesterday as his parents' other closest friend, leaned in slightly. "That's what we're all here to find out," Remus said gently. "Though I suspect the answer won't be as satisfying as you hope." Below them, Amelia Bones rose from her seat in the prosecutor's section. The chamber fell silent as she approached the center of the floor, stopping just short of where Dumbledore sat. "These proceedings will now commence," announced the acting chief warlock, a severe-looking witch named Griselda Marchbanks. "Prosecutor Bones, you may begin." Bones turned to face the Wizengamot, her monocle catching the light. "Esteemed members of the Wizengamot, what you are about to hear will challenge everything you believe about one of our society's most revered figures. The evidence will show that Albus Dumbledore, entrusted with the care and education of generations of magical children, systematically abused that trust in service to his own agenda, an agenda that treated Harry Potter not as a child deserving protection, but as a weapon to be forged through suffering." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Dumbledore's expression remained unchanged. "The charges are as follows," Bones continued, unfurling an official scroll. "Illegal binding of a minor's magic, child endangerment, manipulation of magical guardianship, obstruction of justice in the case of Sirius Black, illegal memory modifications, failure to report a prophecy to the Department of Mysteries as required by law, and willfully leaving a Horcrux, the darkest of magical artifacts, within the body of a child when means of removal were available." The whispers grew louder at the mention of Horcruxes. Many of the older Wizengamot members looked physically ill. "We begin with the testimony of the Sorting Hat of Hogwarts, whose intervention brought these crimes to light." At Bones's gesture, 2 Aurors entered carrying an ornate pedestal upon which rested the ancient Sorting Hat. They placed it carefully in the witness area, and the hat's leather folds rearranged themselves into a face-like configuration. "Do you consent to provide memories for projection?" Bones asked the hat. "I do," the hat replied, its voice echoing through the chamber. Though I must warn those present, what you are about to witness may disturb even the most hardened among you. A ministry specialist approached with a crystalline pensieve and placed it beside the hat. With a murmured incantation, he drew silvery strands from the hat's temple and deposited them into the basin. A gesture of his wand caused the memory to project above the pensieve, visible to the entire courtroom. The image showed Harry sorting from the hat's perspective, first the surface thoughts of an anxious 11-year-old, then the deeper dive that revealed Dumbledore's manipulations. The courtroom watched in horrified silence as the hat discovered the cupboard under the stairs, the systematic neglect, the magical bindings, and finally, the Horcrux deliberately left untreated. When the memory concluded, showing the hat's invocation of ancient magic to summon the Aurors, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. Then, like a dam breaking, the chamber erupted in outrage. "Order!" Marchbanks shouted, sending purple sparks from her wand. "We will have order." Harry sank lower in his seat, mortified that his worst memories, the cupboard, Aunt Petunia's casual cruelty, Uncle Vernon's threats, had been displayed for all to see. Sirius's arm tightened around him. "I'm sorry, Harry," he whispered. "We tried to keep those details private, but the hat's testimony was deemed essential." Harry nodded mutely, understanding but still wishing he could disappear. When order was restored, Bones addressed the hat directly. "In your 900 years of service to Hogwarts, have you ever before invoked the Guardian's right?" "Twice," the hat replied. "Once in 1412 when Headmaster Apollyon Pringle was using blood quills on Muggleborn students, and once in 1738 when a professor was discovered to be using the Imperious Curse to abuse students. In both cases, the matter was handled internally by the Board of Governors. Never before has the situation been so severe as to require summoning the full Auror force." "And what specifically prompted such extreme action in this case?" The hat seemed to consider its words carefully. "The extent of the violations against young Potter was unprecedented. But more concerning was the purpose behind them. Albus Dumbledore was not acting out of personal malice or base desires, as in previous cases. He was systematically shaping a child into a weapon, a sacrifice, and using his positions of power to ensure no one could intervene." "A sacrifice for what purpose?" Bones asked. "For the defeat of Voldemort," the hat said bluntly, ignoring the gasps at the name. "Dumbledore interpreted the prophecy to mean Potter must die to vanquish the Dark Lord. Every action he took was designed to ensure the boy would walk willingly to his death when the time came." Harry felt as if he'd been doused in ice water. The hat's assessment confirmed his worst suspicions about Dumbledore's plans, but hearing it stated so plainly was still a shock. Below, Dumbledore finally stirred. "If I may," he said, his voice as calm and reasonable as ever, "I believe my intentions are being gravely mischaracterized." "You will have your opportunity to speak, Mr. Dumbledore," Marchbanks said sternly. "For now, you will remain silent." The proceedings continued with testimony from the healers who had treated Harry. Healer Tunbridge presented magical scans showing the bindings Dumbledore had placed on Harry's core, bindings that had limited him to accessing barely 40% of his natural magical power. Healer Croker testified about the Horcrux and the relatively simple ritual that had removed it, a ritual Dumbledore could have performed years earlier. "In my professional opinion," Croker stated, "leaving the Horcrux untreated was inexcusable. The damage it caused to Mr. Potter's magical development may never be fully repaired, though his prognosis is significantly better following its removal." Next came testimony from McGonagall, who recounted her objections to leaving Harry with the Dursleys, and Hagrid, who tearfully admitted that Dumbledore had instructed him to withhold certain information from Harry about his family and heritage. Throughout it all, Harry watched Dumbledore's face. The old wizard remained impassive, occasionally making notes on the parchment provided to him, but showing no outward signs of remorse or distress. Finally, it was Sirius's turn to testify. He squeezed Harry's shoulder before making his way down to the witness area. Under Bones's questioning, Sirius detailed how Dumbledore had known he wasn't the Potter's secret keeper, yet had allowed him to be imprisoned without trial. He described the magical godfather bond that should have made it impossible for anyone but him to claim guardianship of Harry. The bond was still active when I was tested at St. Mungo's 2 days ago, Sirius said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Dumbledore didn't break it, he couldn't without killing me. He simply ignored it, using his political power to override ancient magic, knowing no one would question him. And why do you believe he did this? Bones asked. Sirius's gaze locked on Dumbledore. Because I would never have allowed Harry to be raised ignorant of magic, downtrodden, and abused. I would have taught him about his heritage, his power, his rights in our world. Dumbledore needed Harry malleable and desperate for approval, a perfect pawn. When Sirius returned to the private box, his face was drawn with tension. You did well, Padfoot, Remus murmured, using a nickname Harry had learned was from their school days. I wanted to hex him where he sat, Sirius replied through clenched teeth. The evidence continued to mount as the morning stretched into afternoon. Ministry officials testified about irregularities in the Potter wills, which Dumbledore had sealed using his position as chief warlock. Gringotts representatives presented records showing unauthorized withdrawals from Harry's trust vault, with funds diverted to the Dursleys, who had never spent a penny on Harry's care, and various other recipients, including substantial annual payments to Dumbledore himself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dumbledore was permitted to speak in his own defense. He rose slowly, the manacles on his wrists clinking softly. When he spoke, his voice carried the same gentle authority it always had, as if he were addressing a faculty meeting rather than defending himself against criminal charges. I do not deny the actions attributed to me, Dumbledore began, surprising many who had expected vehement denials. I placed bindings on Harry's magic, left him with relatives who would not coddle him, and yes, I allowed the soul fragment to remain. I did these things not out of cruelty, but out of absolute necessity. He paced slowly within the small area permitted to him by his restraints. The prophecy states that Harry Potter is the only one who can vanquish Voldemort. What it does not explicitly state, what I discovered through years of research, is the nature of the connection between them. Voldemort made Horcruxes, multiple Horcruxes, to anchor himself to this plane. And on the night he attacked the Potters, he unwittingly created one more, within Harry himself. Gasps and cries of horror filled the chamber. Harry felt strangely detached, having already processed this information days earlier. I believed, Dumbledore continued, that for Voldemort to be truly defeated, all his Horcruxes would need to be destroyed. Including, ultimately, Harry. The courtroom exploded in outrage. Marchbanks had to shoot off cannon blast sounds from her wand 3 times before order was restored. Are you stating, Bones asked incredulously, that your defense is that you were deliberately preparing a child for death? For a noble sacrifice that would save countless lives, Dumbledore corrected. I did not do these things lightly, Madam Bones. I searched for alternatives. I consulted ancient texts. I explored every avenue. But the prophecy was clear, neither can live while the other survives. Harry's death would be necessary for Voldemort's final defeat. Yet Healer Croaker removed the Horcrux without harming Mr. Potter, Bones pointed out. Dumbledore inclined his head. A development I did not foresee, I admit. Perhaps my interpretation of the prophecy was flawed. Or perhaps we have merely postponed the inevitable. Prophecies have a way of fulfilling themselves despite our best efforts. Even if we accept your interpretation, Marchbanks interjected, leaning forward, how do you justify the other measures? The binding of his magic. The abusive placement. The magical binding was necessary to prevent the soul fragment from drawing power from Harry's core, potentially allowing it to possess him, Dumbledore explained. As for the Dursleys, I needed Harry to develop certain qualities, modesty, resilience, selflessness. A boy raised in the adulation of the wizarding world, aware of his fame and power, might have developed very differently. You wanted him broken, Sirius called out, unable to contain himself. Easier to mold that way, isn't it, Albus? Marchbanks gave Sirius a quelling look but didn't rebuke him. I wanted him tempered, Dumbledore replied, meeting Sirius's gaze evenly. Like a blade that must pass through fire to gain strength. The fate of our world was at stake, is still at stake. I made difficult choices with that burden in mind. The fate of the world, Bones said coldly. The greater good. The same justification you once shared with Gellert Grindelwald, was it not? Dumbledore stilled, and for the first time, his composure cracked slightly. That is a low blow, Madam Bones. Is it? Or is it perhaps the most relevant parallel? Another brilliant wizard who believed the ends justified the means, no matter who suffered along the way. The questioning continued for another hour, with Dumbledore maintaining his position that everything he'd done had been necessary, if regrettable. He expressed no personal remorse toward Harry, only philosophical regret that circumstances had required such measures. Finally, Marchbanks called for a recess before deliberations. As the Wizengamot members filed out, reporters rushed from the chamber to file their stories, and the spectators buzzed with shocked discussions. What a load of hippogriff dung, Sirius muttered as they were escorted through a private exit by Auror Shacklebolt. He's still convinced he was right. That's what makes him so dangerous, Remus said quietly. He genuinely believes in the righteousness of his actions. Nothing is more terrifying than a powerful wizard who thinks he's infallible. Harry remained silent, turning Dumbledore's words over in his mind. Despite everything, a small part of him wondered, what if Dumbledore was right? What if the Horcrux's removal had only postponed an inevitable confrontation with Voldemort that would end in Harry's death? The thought must have shown on his face, because Sirius stopped walking and crouched down to Harry's eye level in the middle of the Ministry corridor. Listen to me, Harry, he said intently. Dumbledore is wrong. He's been wrong from the start. Prophecies are tricky, slippery things, and half the time they only come true because people hear them and make them come true. You are not a sacrifice. You are not a weapon. You're a boy who deserves a childhood and a long, happy life afterward. And I swear to you, on my magic and on the memory of your parents, that I will do everything in my power to make sure you get both. The fierceness in Sirius's voice broke through Harry's doubts. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Besides, Remus added with a small smile, if there's one thing I learned from your father, it's that destiny has a way of bending to the will of a truly determined Potter. The Wizengamot's deliberations lasted less than 2 hours, remarkably swift by wizarding standards. When they returned to the courtroom, the verdict was unanimous, guilty on all charges. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, Marchbanks intoned, you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in Azkaban prison, with your magic bound for the duration of your sentence. Additionally, all titles, positions, and honors are permanently revoked. Your Order of Merlin is rescinded. Upon completion of your sentence, you will remain under magical monitoring for the remainder of your natural life. Dumbledore received the sentence with the same calm detachment he'd shown throughout the trial. Only a slight tightening around his eyes betrayed any emotion. I accept your judgment, he said, though I maintain that my actions, however regrettable, were necessary. I fear the wizarding world will come to understand my perspective sooner than anyone wishes. His gaze found Harry in the gallery. When Voldemort returns, and he will return, remember that the power he knows not may lie in the very sacrifice I prepared you for. That's enough, Dumbledore, Marchbanks snapped. Aurors, remove the prisoner. As Dumbledore was led away, Harry felt a strange mixture of emotions, relief, vindication, but also a lingering unease. Dumbledore's certainty was unnerving, as was the knowledge that whatever happened next, Harry would face it without the guiding hand that had, for better or worse, shaped his destiny until now. It's over, Sirius said, squeezing Harry's shoulder. Let's go home. Home. Such a simple word, yet it held a world of meaning for Harry. Not Privet Drive, not Hogwarts, but a real home with someone who actually wanted him. As they made their way through the ministry's labyrinthine corridors, reporters shouted questions, magical cameras flashed, and ministry workers stared openly. Shacklebolt and two other Aurors maintained a protective formation around them, deflecting the most aggressive journalists with practiced ease. "Mr. Potter. How does it feel to know Dumbledore was grooming you as a sacrifice? Black. Did you seek revenge against Dumbledore during your wrongful imprisonment? Harry. Will you be returning to Hogwarts?" Harry kept his head down, grateful for Sirius's arm around his shoulders and Remus's tall figure blocking him from the worst of the gawking. They had almost reached the designated flow point when a familiar, drawling voice cut through the chaos. "How touching. The convict, the werewolf, and the boy hero. Dumbledore may have fallen, but it seems his penchant for collecting dangerous misfits lives on." Lucius Malfoy stood before them, resplendent in formal robes of deepest green, his silver-topped cane gleaming under the ministry lights. Beside him stood a smaller version of himself, Draco, Harry remembered from their brief encounter in Madame Malkin's. Sirius's arm tightened around Harry. "Malfoy," he said coolly. "Still slithering around the ministry, I see. Don't you have dark artifacts to polish?" Malfoy's lip curled. "Black. Remarkable how quickly you've inserted yourself into Potter's life. One might almost think you've been planning this fortunate turn of events." "What do you want, Lucius?" Remus asked, his normally gentle voice hardening. "Merely to express my concerns," Malfoy replied, his grey eyes calculating. "The wizarding world has suffered a grievous shock. Our most revered leader exposed as a manipulator of children. It calls into question everything Dumbledore stood for, his policies, his appointments, his progressive views on certain members of society." His gaze lingered meaningfully on Remus, whose jaw tightened. "If you're here to gloat, save it," Sirius snapped. "Your master's gone, and you bought your way out of punishment. That doesn't make you welcome in Harry's life." A flash of something, anger, fear, crossed Malfoy's face before his mask of aristocratic disdain returned. Such hostility. I merely wish to extend an olive branch. These are uncertain times, and the Potter heir will need allies among the old families. My son Draco," he gestured to the boy, who had been watching the exchange with undisguised curiosity, "will be in young Harry's year at Hogwarts. Perhaps a friendship between them would help heal the rifts in our society." Harry, who had remained silent until now, looked directly at Draco. He remembered their first meeting, Draco's casual cruelty toward Hagrid, his disdain for anyone not of the right sort. The boy reminded Harry uncomfortably of Dudley, albeit more polished. "I can choose my own friends, thanks," Harry said quietly but firmly. Draco flushed, clearly offended. Lucius's smile grew colder. "Of course you can," he said smoothly. "I only hope your guardians allow you to make those choices freely, unlike your previous custodian." He inclined his head slightly. "Good day, Mr. Potter." Black. Lupin. The winds of change are blowing through our world. I do hope you're prepared for the storm. With that cryptic statement, he guided Draco away, the crowd parting before them like water. "Slimy git," Sirius muttered. "Hasn't changed a bit." What did he mean about a storm? Harry asked as they continued toward the floor. Remus and Sirius exchanged significant looks. "Political maneuvering," Remus explained. "With Dumbledore gone, there's a power vacuum in wizarding Britain. Lucius Malfoy and others like him will try to fill it." "He was one of Voldemort's followers, wasn't he?" Harry asked, remembering fragments of conversations he'd overheard. "One of his inner circle," Sirius confirmed grimly. "Claimed he was under the Imperius curse after Voldemort fell. Bought his way to freedom with generous donations to the right people." They reached the Floo station, where a ministry worker was maintaining the special secure connection to Grimmauld Place that had been established for them. "Ready to see your new home?" Sirius asked, his expression brightening as he clearly made an effort to shake off the encounter with Malfoy. Harry nodded, eager to leave the ministry and its prying eyes behind. Though home was still a concept he hardly dared believe in, despite Sirius's repeated assurances over the past 3 days. It's not much to look at yet, Sirius warned as they stepped into the floor one by one. Family house. Been empty for years except for a mad old house elf. But we're working on it, and it's protected by every security measure known to wizard kind. Harry hardly heard him, too busy trying not to choke on soot as he experienced floor travel for only the second time in his life. He stumbled out of the fireplace into a cavernous kitchen that smelled of fresh paint and cooking spices. "Master is bringing the great Harry Potter," squeaked an excited voice. A small creature with bat-like ears and enormous eyes bounced on its toes near the kitchen table, which was laden with what appeared to be enough food for 20 people. "Dobby has prepared a feast to welcome the great Harry Potter to his new home." Thank you," Harry said, bewildered. "Who's Dobby?" Sirius emerged from the fireplace behind him, followed by Remus. "Ah, yes. Meet the newest addition to our household. Dobby approached us yesterday at St. Mungo's, begging to serve the great Harry Potter. He's a free elf, insisted on wages and everything, very progressive, and apparently has a bit of a hero worship thing going on with you." "Dobby has heard of Harry Potter's greatness for many years," the elf confirmed, bowing so low his nose touched the floor. "But Dobby never imagined the great wizard would free Dobby from his wicked masters." "I freed you?" Harry asked, completely lost. "Not directly," Remus clarified. "Dobby belonged to the Malfoys. When Lucius was called to testify about Dumbledore's activities on the Hogwarts board, Dobby overheard him discussing some plot involving you. Dobby tried to warn his master against it, which constitutes disobedience. Malfoy gave him clothes on the spot. Dobby has come to protect Harry Potter," the elf declared. "Wicked Master is planning dark things for Harry Potter at Hogwarts." Harry's head was spinning. "What things?" "Dobby does not know details," the elf admitted, ears drooping. "But Master spoke of a diary and a chamber and a message for Dumbledore's allies. Dobby thinks it very dangerous." Sirius and Remus exchanged concerned glances. "We've already informed Madame Bones," Sirius told Harry. "She's looking into it. Whatever Malfoy was planning, the fact that Dumbledore's gone may change his approach. For now, let's focus on getting you settled." He gestured broadly at the kitchen. "Welcome to number 12, Grimmauld Place, ancestral home of the Black family and current headquarters of Operation Give Harry a Proper Childhood." Despite his lingering concerns about Malfoy's plans, Harry couldn't help but smile at Sirius's dramatic declaration. The kitchen, while cavernous and clearly old, had been freshly painted in warm cream and gold tones. Copper pots hung from the ceiling, and a cheerful fire crackled in the enormous hearth. "It's brilliant," Harry said honestly. Compared to the sterile perfection of Privet Drive, the slightly shabby but clearly loved kitchen felt immediately more like home than anywhere he'd ever been. "Wait till you see your room," Sirius said, grinning. "Remus and I have been working on it for 2 days straight. Had to exorcise a boggart from the wardrobe and remove some rather nasty cursed wallpaper, but it's coming along nicely." As they made their way upstairs, Sirius pointed out various features of the house, most accompanied by commentary about how he planned to remove, replace, or thoroughly cleanse them of Black family nastiness. The house was indeed in the midst of a massive renovation, with some rooms gleaming updated while others remained shrouded in dust covers or sealed with warning spells. "My family were dark wizards, most of them," Sirius explained as they climbed to the second floor. "Pure-blood fanatics. I ran away when I was 16, went to live with your dad and his parents. Never thought I'd come back here, but it's the most secure location we have, and security is priority number 1 right now." They reached a door with a gleaming brass nameplate that read, "Harry." Sirius stopped, suddenly looking nervous. "It's not perfect yet," he cautioned. "If you don't like anything, we can change it. And you can decorate however you want." This is just to get started. He pushed open the door, and Harry's breath caught in his throat. The room was easily 4 times the size of his bedroom at Privet Drive. Sunlight streamed through tall windows that must have been enchanted, because Harry was certain it had been cloudy outside the ministry. The walls were painted in Gryffindor red and gold, but tastefully, with most of the wall space a warm cream color and just accents in the house colors. A 4-poster bed that could have fit the entire Dursley family dominated one wall, with a desk, wardrobe, and bookcase arranged around the room. A perch near the window clearly meant for Hedwig stood empty. His owl was still at Hogwarts with his trunk and other belongings. But what made Harry's eyes burn with unexpected tears were the photographs. Dozens of them, framed and arranged on the walls. His parents waved at him from their wedding day. A baby Harry zoomed around on a toy broomstick while his father laughed and his mother pretended to scold them both. 4 teenage boys, unmistakably Sirius, Remus, Harry's father, and a 4th he didn't recognize, grinned mischievously from the Hogwarts grounds. "I got copies from old friends," Sirius explained softly, watching Harry's face. "Thought you might like to wake up to them. There are albums too, in the desk drawer. And we can get more. Hagrid's been collecting some, and McGonagall had a few from school events." Harry nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He'd gone from having no images of his parents at all to being surrounded by their smiling faces. It was overwhelming. "There's a bathroom through that door," Remus added gently, giving Harry a moment to compose himself. "And the room next door is set up as a study, though we weren't sure what subjects you'd be most interested in pursuing." "This is..." Harry swallowed hard. "This is amazing. Thank you." Sirius's face lit up. "You like it, then?" "I wasn't sure about the colors, thought maybe it was too obvious, Gryffindor colors, but Remus said, 'It's perfect,'" Harry interrupted. "Really? I've never had. I mean, at the Dursleys." "You never have to think about them again," Sirius said fiercely. "This is your home now. For as long as you want it." Harry nodded, running a hand over the soft quilt on the bed, in his room, in his home. The concept was still so foreign that he half expected to wake up back in the cupboard under the stairs. "We should let you rest," Remus said, noting Harry's emotional and physical exhaustion. "It's been a long day. Dinner will be in a couple of hours, and we can talk more then. Your trunk and belongings should arrive from Hogwarts by this evening." "When do I go back?" Harry asked. "To Hogwarts, I mean." "That's one of the things we need to discuss," Sirius said, his expression turning serious. "McGonagall has offered to arrange private tutoring here until the winter term if you prefer. Given everything that's happened, no one would blame you for wanting some time away from the spotlight." Harry considered this. Part of him was tempted by the offer. The thought of returning to Hogwarts, where everyone would stare and whisper about Dumbledore's plans for him, was daunting. But then he thought of Ron's loyal friendship, Hermione's earnest concern, the twins' irreverent humor. He thought of the feeling he'd had the moment he stepped into the Great Hall, that sense of finally belonging somewhere. "I want to go back," he said firmly. "I don't want to hide away. That's what Dumbledore would have expected, for me to be too afraid or ashamed to face everyone." Sirius grinned, a flash of fierce pride in his eyes. "Spoken like a true Potter. Your dad would say the same thing." He ruffled Harry's hair. "We'll let McGonagall know. Probably best to give it another week for your magic to fully stabilize and for the media frenzy to die down a bit, but after that, it's back to Hogwarts for you." After Sirius and Remus left, Harry sprawled on his new bed, staring up at the canopy. The events of the past 4 days swirled in his mind, from the Sorting Hat's discovery to Dumbledore's arrest, from the removal of the Horcrux to the trial and sentencing. It felt like years had passed, not mere days. He rolled onto his side, studying a photograph of his parents dancing at what appeared to be a Christmas party. They looked so young, so carefree. His father twirled his mother, both of them laughing silently in the magical image, oblivious to the tragedy that awaited them. "I'll make you proud," Harry whispered to them. "I promise." As he drifted towards sleep, exhaustion finally claiming him, Harry couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the eye of the storm, a brief moment of peace before the next tempest. Dumbledore was gone, but his warnings lingered. Voldemort would return. The prophecy remained unfulfilled. But for the first time, Harry wouldn't face these challenges alone. He had Sirius now, and Remus. He had real friends at Hogwarts. And most importantly, he had the truth, not Dumbledore's carefully curated version, but the messy, complicated reality. Whatever came next, Harry would meet it on his own terms. Not as the weapon Dumbledore had tried to forge, but as the person he was choosing to become. Harry's first week at Grimmauld Place passed in a blur of new experiences. Having adults who genuinely cared about his welfare was perhaps the strangest of all. Sirius and Remus insisted he eat properly at every meal, asked about his preferences for everything from food to daily schedules, and seemed genuinely interested in his thoughts and feelings. After years of being treated as an unwelcome burden by the Dursleys, the sudden shift to being the center of positive attention was disorienting. On his third day in his new home, Harry woke to find Sirius already in the kitchen, surrounded by stacks of parchment and looking uncharacteristically serious. "Morning, pup," Sirius greeted him, pushing a plate of toast and eggs toward him. "Sleep well?" Harry nodded, sliding into a chair. "What's all this?" he asked, gesturing to the parchment. "The Potter accounts," Sirius said, running a hand through his hair. "Gringotts sent them over yesterday. I've been going through everything, trying to get a handle on what Dumbledore did with your family's assets." Harry looked at the stacks with new interest. "I didn't know there was more than my trust vault. Hagrid only showed me that one." Sirius's expression darkened momentarily. "That's because Dumbledore didn't want you to know. The trust vault is just a small portion of the Potter estate, set aside specifically for your education and early needs. The main family vaults contain significantly more: investments, properties, heirlooms, that sort of thing." "Properties?" Harry repeated, stunned. "You mean like houses?" "Houses, land, a share in several businesses. The Potters were an old family, Harry. Not as ancient as the Blacks, perhaps, but wealthy and well-established. Your father's parents, your grandparents, added substantially to the fortune through potion patents." Sirius shuffled through some papers. "There's Potter Cottage in Godric's Hollow, though it's mostly a ruin now. A manor house in Wales that's been sealed since your grandparents died. A holiday cottage in France. And various plots of land in magical communities." Harry stared at him, trying to process this information. All his life, he'd worn Dudley's cast-offs and been told he should be grateful for the scraps the Dursleys provided. To learn he'd been wealthy all along was jarring. "Why didn't I know any of this?" he asked, a note of anger creeping into his voice. "Because Dumbledore wanted you dependent and ignorant," Sirius said bluntly. "According to these records, he used his position as your magical guardian to seal the main vaults until your majority, that's 17 in the wizarding world, and diverted funds from your trust vault to various causes." "What causes?" Sirius's expression was grim. "Some to the Dursleys, ostensibly for your care, though it's clear they never spent it on you. Some to a war orphans fund that appears to exist only on paper. And a substantial annual sum to himself, listed as a guardian stipend. He was paying himself to keep me miserable." Harry asked incredulously. "So it seems." Sirius sighed. "The good news is, now that I've been cleared and formally recognized as your guardian, I've been able to unseal most of the accounts. Gringotts is conducting a full audit and will attempt to recover misappropriated funds where possible." Harry pushed his eggs around his plate, his appetite diminished. "I don't even care about the money," he said finally. "It's just, the more I learn, the more it feels like my whole life has been a lie." Sirius reached across the table to squeeze his shoulder. "Not all of it. Your parents' love for you was real. Your friendships at Hogwarts are real. What we're building here, this family, that's real too. Harry managed a small smile. Yeah. I know. Now, Sirius said, his tone deliberately lightening, there is one piece of business we should address sooner rather than later. Your appearance at Hogwarts. Harry frowned. My appearance? Clothes, Harry. Proper ones that actually fit. Wizarding and Muggle both. Those hand-me-downs from your cousin are going straight in the bin. I've arranged for a personal shopper from Twilfit and Tattings to visit this afternoon, and we've got an appointment at a Muggle department store tomorrow. You don't have to, Harry began automatically, then stopped himself. This was something he'd have to get used to, people doing things for him not out of obligation, but because they cared. I mean, thanks. That sounds great. Sirius grinned. Excellent. And while we're at it, we should do something about those glasses. There are vision correction potions that might eliminate the need for them entirely, or we could at least get you a more stylish pair. Those ones scream I was chosen by Petunia Dursley and repaired with spellotape. Despite himself, Harry laughed. They were, actually. Chosen by Aunt Petunia, I mean. From a bargain bin. Criminal, Sirius declared dramatically. A crime against fashion and vision alike. We'll add an Optiwizard to the schedule. Their planning was interrupted by the arrival of an elegant tawny owl bearing a letter with the Hogwarts seal. Harry accepted it curiously, wondering if it was from McGonagall. To his surprise, when he broke the seal, a prefect's badge fell out onto the table. What on earth? Sirius picked it up, examining it with a puzzled expression. Harry scanned the letter quickly. It's from Percy Weasley, he explained. He says he knows I'll be returning to Hogwarts soon and wanted to assure me that as head boy, he'll make sure no one bothers me with inappropriate questions. He's sending his prefect badge from last year as a token of solidarity and says he'll make sure the other prefects know I'm under his personal protection. Sirius's eyebrows rose. That's unexpectedly decent of him. Arthur and Molly's boy, right? The serious one. Harry nodded, feeling touched by Percy's gesture, odd as it was. He's very big on rules and responsibility. Ron says he can be a bit of a prat about it sometimes, but he means well. Having allies among the prefects isn't a bad thing, Sirius mused. Though I never thought I'd hear myself say that. James and I spent most of our school years trying to avoid prefects. Ron mentioned you were a bit of a troublemaker, Harry said with a grin. Sirius clutched his chest in mock offense. A bit? We were legendary, I'll have you know. The Marauders, that's what we called ourselves, your dad, Remus, me, and... His expression clouded momentarily. Well, the four of us. We held the record for most detentions ever served until those Weasley twins came along. Apparently they're giving our legacy a run for its money. Fred and George have the Marauders map, Harry blurted out, then immediately wondered if he shouldn't have. I mean, I've heard them mention it. It's some kind of magical map that shows where everyone is in the castle. Sirius's jaw dropped. They have the map. Our map. How in Merlin's name did they get hold of that? Filch confiscated it our 7th year. They nicked it from his office in their first year, according to Ron. A slow, delighted grin spread across Sirius's face. Oh, that's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Prongs would be thrilled to know it found its way to a new generation of mischief makers. We'll have to let them know who created it when you go back. Prongs? Harry asked. Your dad's nickname. We all had them, I was Padfoot, Remus was Moony, and Peter. Sirius's expression hardened. Wormtail. The traitor who betrayed your parents to Voldemort. Harry had heard fragments of this story over the past few days but not the complete version. What happened with him? Is he in Azkaban now? Sirius exchanged a glance with Remus, who had just entered the kitchen looking tired but alert. Not exactly, Sirius admitted. When the investigation into my case reopened, they discovered that Peter was never found, just a finger and some bloody robes. The current theory is that he faked his death and went into hiding. The Aurors are looking for him, Remus added, pouring himself coffee. But after 10 years, the trail is cold. He could be anywhere. Why did he do it? Harry asked, the betrayal feeling personal even though he had no memory of the man. Why betray my parents to Voldemort? Remus sat down heavily. Fear, probably. And self-preservation. Peter always gravitated toward those he perceived as powerful or popular. In school, that was your father and Sirius. Later, when Voldemort's power was at its peak. He trailed off with a shrug. He was our friend, Sirius said, his voice tight with old pain. We trusted him completely. That's why your parents made him their secret keeper instead of me, we thought it was the perfect bluff. Voldemort would come after me, while the real secret was with Peter. We never imagined he'd already turned. Harry absorbed this grimly. Another layer of betrayal in the story of his parents' deaths. Is that why you went after him? After Voldemort killed my parents? Sirius nodded, his eyes distant. I found your father first, in the ruins of the house. Then your mother, and you, alive, somehow, with just that scar. Hagrid arrived with orders from Dumbledore to take you to your aunt and uncle. I argued, but, well, I wasn't thinking clearly. I handed you over, planning to come back for you after I dealt with Peter. His voice turned bitter. Biggest mistake of my life. You couldn't have known what would happen, Remus said quietly. I should have put Harry first, Sirius insisted. But I was consumed with revenge. I tracked Peter down in a Muggle street, cornered him, and the little rat outsmarted me. Shouted for everyone to hear that I'd betrayed Lily and James, blew apart the street with a spell behind his back, cut off his own finger, and transformed. Transformed? Harry asked, confused. Peter was an animagus, Remus explained. He could turn into a rat. That's how he escaped. In the chaos after the explosion, he simply transformed and disappeared into the sewers. We were all animagi, Sirius added. Your dad, Peter, and I. We learned in school, illegally, so we could keep Remus company during his monthly problem. Harry looked to Remus questioningly. I'm a werewolf, Harry, Remus said simply. I was bitten as a child. Your father and his friends became animagi to keep me company during full moons, since werewolves are only dangerous to humans, not animals. Harry blinked, processing this new information. So, what animals were you all? Your dad was a stag, prongs, for his antlers. I'm a large black dog, hence Padfoot. And Peter, appropriately enough, was a rat. Could you show me? Harry asked, curiosity overcoming him. The transformation, I mean. Sirius grinned. Always happy to show off. He stood up and, with a faint popping sound, transformed into an enormous black dog with shaggy fur and bright eyes. The dog bounded around the kitchen, barked once, then leapt up to put its paws on Harry's shoulders and lick his face enthusiastically. Ugh, Sirius. Harry laughed, pushing the dog away. That's disgusting. The dog transformed back into Sirius, who was laughing unapologetically. Sorry, couldn't resist. The dog's impulses sometimes bleed through. Could my dad teach me to become an animagus? Harry asked eagerly, then immediately regretted it when he saw the flash of pain cross Sirius's face. I mean, could you and Remus teach me, someday? Sirius recovered quickly. When you're older, absolutely. It's complex magic, and potentially dangerous if done incorrectly. But it's also a proud family tradition now. James would want you to carry it on. Perhaps after Harry's 3rd year, Remus suggested diplomatically. It requires a solid foundation in transfiguration. Harry nodded, filing the information away. Becoming an animagus like his father was definitely going on his list of goals. What else can you tell me about my dad? And my mum? Sirius and Remus exchanged smiles, and for the next hour, the kitchen rang with tales of James Potter's Quidditch prowess, Lily Evans's formidable temper, and the legendary Evans-Potter courtship that had taken 7 years to come to fruition. Your mother hexed your father bald in our 5th year when he asked her out for the 20th time that month, Remus recalled fondly. He wore a hat for 2 weeks before Madame Pomfrey took pity on him. But he got her in the end, Sirius added. Grew up a bit, deflated his head, showed her he could be responsible. Head boy to her head girl in 7th year. They were inseparable after that. Harry soaked up every detail, every anecdote, building a mental image of his parents that went beyond the smiling photographs. They became real to him in a way they never had before, flawed, funny, brave, brilliant people who had loved each other and their son fiercely. For the first time in his life, Harry felt connected to his past. And that connection gave him strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The morning of Harry's return to Hogwarts dawned clear and crisp, with just a hint of autumn in the air. Standing on platform 9 3/4, surrounded by the chaos of families saying goodbye and students reuniting after the eventful summer, Harry felt simultaneously excited and apprehensive. Remember, Sirius was saying, straightening Harry's new robes for the 3rd time, if anyone gives you trouble, you write to us immediately. Remus and I can be at Hogwarts within the hour if needed. I'll be fine, Sirius, Harry assured him, though he appreciated the concern. McGonagall's got everything under control. Indeed, the past 2 weeks had seen significant changes at Hogwarts. McGonagall had been confirmed as headmistress, with Phileas Flitwick stepping up as deputy headmaster. Several new security measures had been implemented, including additional wards and a complete review of all enchantments placed on the castle during Dumbledore's tenure. Just remember you've got options, Sirius insisted. You don't have to stay if you're uncomfortable. Private tutoring is still on the table. Or we could even look at other schools, Beauxbatons, Ilvermorny, Sirius, Remus interrupted gently, you're hovering. Harry's going to be late if we don't let him board soon. Sirius sighed, running a hand through his hair. Right. Sorry. It's just. I've only just got you back, and now you're leaving again. I'll write every week, Harry promised. And I'll be home for Christmas. Home. The word still gave him a warm feeling in his chest. Harry. A familiar voice called out. Ron Weasley pushed through the crowd, followed by the twins and Percy. There you are. We've been looking all over. Ron. Harry grinned, relieved to see his friend. Despite daily letters, he'd missed the easy camaraderie they'd developed during their brief time at Hogwarts. Blimey, you look different, Ron said, looking Harry up and down. Taller. Better fed, Remus supplied with a smile. And properly clothed. It was true, 2 weeks of regular meals and new clothes that actually fit had made a noticeable difference in Harry's appearance. His new glasses, enchanted to stay on during Quidditch and resist fogging or rain, framed eyes that seemed brighter, more alert. The lightning scar on his forehead had faded to a thin silver line, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. Mr. Black, Mr. Lupin, Percy said formally, stepping forward and extending his hand. I wanted to assure you personally that as head boy, I'll be keeping a close eye on Harry's situation. I've already briefed the prefects on appropriate boundaries and implemented a new anti-bullying protocol with Headmistress McGonagall's approval. Sirius looked slightly bemused as he shook Percy's hand. Thank you, Percy. That's very thorough of you. Merlin's beard, Perce, you sound like you're running for minister already, George, or was it Fred, groaned. Ignore him, the other twin said to Harry. He's been practicing that speech all morning. Percy flushed but maintained his dignified demeanor. Some of us take our responsibilities seriously, unlike certain individuals who've already managed to earn detention before term even properly begins. A record even we never managed, Sirius remarked to Remus in a stage whisper. James would be impressed. The twins' heads snapped around in unison. You're Sirius Black, one said. Harry's godfather. The one and only, Sirius confirmed with a slight bow. The one who spent 10 years in Azkaban for a crime he didn't commit, the other twin added. Also true, unfortunately. The twins exchanged a significant look. We have questions, they said together. About Azkaban? Sirius asked, his expression clouding. About the map, they replied. Sirius's face split into a wide grin. Ah. Harry mentioned you'd gotten hold of our little creation. Moony and I would be delighted to discuss it with fellow mischief makers. He glanced at Percy, who was now distracted by a first year asking for directions. Perhaps during the first Hogsmeade weekend. Meet us at the Three Broomsticks. The twins looked as though Christmas had come early. You're Moony, one whispered reverently to Remus, who nodded with a small smile. And you're Padfoot? The other asked Sirius. Then Harry's dad was, Prongs, Sirius confirmed. Look, the train's about to leave. We'll talk properly next month, all right? For now, just keep an eye on Harry for us. On our honor as Marauders in training, they vowed solemnly, then immediately ruined the effect by winking broadly at Harry. As the warning whistle blew, there was a flurry of activity on the platform. Last hugs were exchanged, trunks were hauled aboard, and tearful goodbyes were called out windows. Sirius pulled Harry into a fierce embrace. Be safe, he murmured. And remember, whatever happens, you're not alone anymore. I know, Harry said, returning the hug just as tightly. Thank you. For everything. As the Hogwarts Express pulled away from the station, Harry leaned out the window, waving until Sirius and Remus were tiny figures in the distance. When they finally disappeared around a bend, he turned to find Ron watching him with an unusually perceptive expression. They're really good for you, aren't they? Ron said. Black and Lupin. You seem different. Happier. Harry smiled, slightly embarrassed by his friend's observation. Yeah. They are. It's strange having adults actually care what happens to me, but, nice. Good, Ron said firmly. You deserve it. Now come on, Hermione's saving us a compartment. She's got about 1,000,000 questions about everything that's happened. As they made their way through the crowded corridor, Harry was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed him. Some students openly pointed, others quickly averted their eyes when he looked their way. The Daily Prophet had run almost daily articles about the boy who lifts liberation from Dumbledore's schemes, and Wizarding Wireless programs had devoted hours to analyzing the implications of the former headmaster's fall from grace. Just ignore them, Ron advised, noticing Harry's discomfort. Fred says people get bored of gossip after about 2 weeks unless you give them new material. Fred is surprisingly wise sometimes, Harry replied, grateful for the advice. They found Hermione in a compartment near the middle of the train, already changed into her school robes and surrounded by books. She leapt up when they entered, immediately engulfing Harry in a hug that nearly knocked the wind out of him. Harry. We've been so worried. Are you all right? The papers have been absolutely dreadful, speculating about everything, and my parents were concerned they might close Hogwarts after what happened with the headmaster, but I told them Professor McGonagall would never let that happen, and, Hermione, Ron interrupted, let him breathe. She released Harry, looking slightly embarrassed. Sorry. It's just been so chaotic, and no one seems to know exactly what happened. The Daily Prophet says one thing, the Quibbler says something completely different, and the professors won't tell us anything officially. Harry sat down across from her, grateful that at least in this compartment, he could speak freely. What do you want to know? Everything, she said immediately. But only what you're comfortable sharing, she added, clearly making an effort to contain her curiosity. So Harry told them, the full story, from the Sorting Hat's discovery to Dumbledore's trial and sentencing, from the removal of the Horcrux to his new life with Sirius. Ron, who knew bits and pieces from their letters, listened with rapt attention to the details Harry hadn't included in writing. Hermione gasped at all the appropriate moments, her expression shifting from horror to outrage to sympathy. "That's absolutely monstrous," she said when Harry finished. "Binding your magic. Leaving that thing in your scar. And all for some prophecy that might not even mean what he thought it meant." "That's Dumbledore for you," said a new voice from the compartment doorway. "Always 10 steps ahead, even when he's walking off a cliff." Neville Longbottom stood there, looking uncertain whether to enter or continue on. Harry was struck by how different he appeared from their brief meeting before the sorting, still round-faced and somewhat shy, but standing straighter, with a determined set to his jaw that hadn't been there before. "Neville," Harry greeted him, genuinely pleased to see the other boy. "Come in." Neville hesitated. "Are you sure? I don't want to intrude if you're talking about, everything." "It's fine," Harry assured him. "Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you specifically." "Me?" Neville looked bewildered as he took the seat beside Hermione. "Why me?" Harry glanced at Ron and Hermione, then back to Neville. "Because according to Dumbledore's trial testimony, the prophecy could have referred to either of us. We were both born at the end of July, to parents who had defied Voldemort 3 times. Neville paled visibly. "What? That can't be right. I'm nobody special." "Neither am I," Harry said simply. "Not really. But Voldemort chose to attack my family that night, marking me as his equal according to the prophecy. If he'd chosen differently, it could have been me," Neville whispered, looking stricken. "With the scar and the everything. But that doesn't make us so different," Harry continued. "Our parents both stood against him. Both suffered for it." He didn't elaborate, but something in Neville's eyes told him the other boy understood the reference to his parents' fate, information Sirius had shared with Harry in one of their many conversations about the First War. "My gran didn't want me to come back this year," Neville admitted. "After everything with Dumbledore came out. Said it showed the school wasn't safe. But I insisted. I couldn't." He trailed off, looking embarrassed. "Couldn't what?" Hermione prompted gently. Neville straightened his shoulders. "I couldn't let my parents down. They sacrificed everything to fight against you-know-who. If Dumbledore was wrong about Harry, wrong about how to defeat him, then someone has to figure out what's right. And I want to help." The simple declaration hung in the air. Harry felt a surge of respect for the quiet boy he'd barely noticed during their first brief week at Hogwarts. "We could use your help," Harry said sincerely. "All of us could. Dumbledore might be gone, but Voldemort isn't. And according to my godfather, some of his followers are still around, still dangerous. Like Malfoy's father," Ron added darkly. "Dad says he's been throwing his weight around the Ministry ever since Dumbledore was arrested." "And Professor Snape," Neville said, then immediately looked as if he regretted speaking. "Snape's complicated," Harry said carefully. The potions master's role in recent events was something Sirius and Remus had argued about extensively in Harry's presence. According to the trial testimony, he was working for Dumbledore as a spy, but he also took an unbreakable vow to protect me. Apparently, he and my mother were friends before Hogwarts." "Snape and your mum? Friends?" Ron looked revolted by the very idea. "It's true. They grew up in the same neighborhood. Sirius said Snape was in love with her, which is why he turned against Voldemort when he targeted my family." "That's actually quite sad," Hermione observed. "Unrequited love turning him from the dark side. Doesn't make him any less of a git to us in class," Ron muttered. "No," Harry agreed, "but it helps explain why he's still at Hogwarts despite his past. McGonagall kept him on after a review of all the staff. Said he was acerbic but competent and genuinely remorseful for past allegiances." The conversation might have continued in this direction, but a commotion in the corridor interrupted them. Raised voices approached their compartment, one particularly drawling and familiar. "Don't care what your orders are, Weasley." "My father." The compartment door slid open to reveal Draco Malfoy flanked by his usual companions, Crabbe and Goyle, with Percy Weasley standing stiffly behind them. "I've informed Mr. Malfoy that all students must respect others' compartment privacy," Percy said, his prefect badge gleaming. "But he insists on speaking with you, Harry." Draco's pale face flushed with annoyance. "I don't need a chaperone, Weasley. I merely wish to express my sympathies to Potter. Finding out your mentor has been manipulating your entire life must be distressing." The false concern in his voice made Harry's teeth clench. "Dumbledore wasn't my mentor, Malfoy. And I'm doing fine without your sympathies." Of course, Draco said smoothly. "Still, it's fortunate the Sorting Hat intervened when it did. One has to wonder what might have happened if you'd remained under his influence much longer." His gaze swept the compartment, lingering dismissively on Ron, Hermione, and Neville. "Though I see you're still surrounding yourself with Dumbledore's preferred type of company." Ron half rose from his seat, but Hermione grabbed his arm. "What's that supposed to mean, Malfoy?" Harry asked coldly. "Simply that there are other perspectives in the wizarding world besides Dumbledore's progressive views. Now that you're free of his influence, perhaps you might consider broadening your horizons." He extended his hand. "My offer of friendship still stands, Potter. My father holds considerable influence in the ministry. He could be a valuable ally in the new political landscape." Harry looked at the offered hand, remembering Lucius Malfoy's cold eyes and cryptic warnings at the ministry. "I think your father has his own agenda, Malfoy. And I doubt it includes my best interests." Draco's hand dropped, his expression hardening. "You'll regret that, Potter. Things are changing at Hogwarts. The old order is falling. You'd be wise not to remain attached to it." "Is that a threat?" Percy asked sharply. "Because threatening fellow students is expressly forbidden under its friendly advice," Draco interrupted smoothly. "Nothing more." He glanced once more at Harry. "Consider what I've said, Potter. The offer won't remain open indefinitely." With that, he turned and stalked away, Crabbe and Goyle lumbering after him. Percy looked apologetically at Harry. "Sorry about that. I can't technically prevent him from speaking to you, but I can ensure he does so respectfully." "It's fine, Percy," Harry assured him. "Thanks for trying." After Percy left to continue his patrol, Ron slumped back in his seat. Slimy git. What did he mean about things changing at Hogwarts? "His father's on the board of governors," Neville supplied. "Gran says he's been pushing for all sorts of new policies since Dumbledore was removed. Stricter regulations on Muggle-born admission, curriculum reviews to preserve traditional values, that sort of thing." "Can he do that?" Harry asked, alarmed. "Not without majority support," Neville replied. "And so far, the other governors are resisting. But Lucius Malfoy has influence, and money. Gran says we shouldn't underestimate him." Hermione looked troubled. "Do you think, could they actually change admission policies? Could they stop Muggleborns from attending?" "Not while McGonagall's headmistress," Harry said firmly, remembering the fierce protectiveness he'd seen in the professor since his return to the wizarding world. "She'd resign before letting that happen." "And that might be exactly what Malfoy wants," Hermione pointed out. "If McGonagall were forced out, who would replace her? Someone more sympathetic to pure-blood views?" The possibility hung uneasily in the air. Harry had been so focused on his personal situation, Dumbledore's manipulations, the Horcrux, his new life with Sirius, that he hadn't fully considered the wider political implications of Dumbledore's fall from power. For all his flaws and questionable methods, Dumbledore had been a powerful champion for Muggle-born rights and integration. With him gone, the balance of power was shifting. "We can't let that happen," Harry said after a moment. Hogwarts has to remain open to everyone with magical ability. That's what the founders intended. Well, not all of them, Hermione corrected. Slytherin wanted, even Slytherin accepted half-bloods, Neville interjected, surprising them all with his knowledge. Pure-blood supremacy as we know it today didn't really develop until the Statute of Secrecy was established in the 1600s. Before that, the concern was more about magical ability and avoiding witch hunts than blood status. They all stared at him. "What?" he said defensively. "My gran made me study magical history. Said I needed to understand my heritage." "That's actually fascinating," Hermione said, looking at Neville with new respect. "The history books in the Hogwarts library don't go into that much detail about pre-statute wizarding society." "Probably because they were written by purebloods," Ron observed. "Dad says history always favors whoever's holding the quill." The train rumbled on through the Scottish countryside as they continued discussing the political situation. By the time they changed into their robes, Harry felt a new sense of purpose forming. Dumbledore might have been wrong about many things, but his commitment to keeping Hogwarts open and accessible had been admirable. Now, with the old headmaster gone, it would fall to others to uphold those principles, including, perhaps, Harry himself. The Hogwarts Express began to slow as it approached Hogsmeade Station. Outside the windows, darkness had fallen, and the distant lights of the castle twinkled like earthbound stars. Harry felt a flutter of nerves mixed with determination. His first real home, now freed from Dumbledore's manipulations but facing new challenges. "Ready?" Ron asked as they gathered their belongings. Harry nodded, straightening his new robes. "Ready." Together, they stepped onto the platform, ready to face whatever awaited them at Hogwarts. The great hall blazed with light as Harry entered, the enchanted ceiling above reflecting a clear night sky sprinkled with stars. He paused just inside the doorway, steeling himself against the inevitable stares. Sure enough, conversations faltered as students noticed his arrival, heads turning, whispers erupting in his wake. "Just keep walking," Hermione murmured from his right side. "They'll get bored eventually." Harry nodded, fixing his gaze on the Gryffindor table where the Weasley twins were enthusiastically waving him over. With Ron and Hermione flanking him on one side and Neville hovering protectively on the other, he made his way across the hall. "The man of the hour. George, or possibly Fred," declared as Harry slid into a seat. "Looking much improved, I must say. Is it true you've moved into a mansion with a private Quidditch pitch?" Harry snorted. "Hardly. It's a townhouse in London. Nice, but nothing like that." "Pity," the twin sighed dramatically. "We were hoping for invitations to practice over Christmas." "You're all welcome to visit," Harry said sincerely. "Sirius would love the company. He says the place is too quiet with just him and Remus rattling around." Fred, unless it was George, grinned. "Careful what you offer, Potter. We'll take you up on that." Before Harry could respond, Professor McGonagall, no, Headmistress McGonagall now, stepped up to the ornate podium where Dumbledore had once stood. The owl-shaped lectern that had been Dumbledore's signature had been replaced with a simpler design bearing the Hogwarts crest. "Welcome back, students," McGonagall began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the hall without magical amplification. "For those returning, welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. For our first years, who were sorted earlier this evening, welcome to your new home." Harry glanced toward the far end of the table where the new Gryffindor first years sat, looking simultaneously overwhelmed and excited. Had he ever looked that young? It seemed impossible that just 2 weeks ago, he'd been among them, waiting for the hat to decide his fate. "As you are all aware," McGonagall continued, "Hogwarts has undergone significant changes since last term. I have assumed the role of headmistress, with Professor Flitwick serving as deputy headmaster. Professor Sinistra will now serve as head of Gryffindor House, while continuing her duties as astronomy professor." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the Gryffindor table. The elegant, reserved astronomy professor was not who most would have expected to replace McGonagall as their head of house. Additionally, we welcome Professor Charity Burbage, who will be taking over Transfiguration classes for 1st through 5th years, while I continue to teach the Newt-level courses. And joining us from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement's Auror Training Division, Professor Alastair Moody, who will serve as our defense against the dark arts instructor. All eyes turned to the gnarled, battle-scarred wizard at the end of the staff table. With his wild grey hair, magical revolving eye, and wooden leg, Moody looked more like a veteran warrior than a teacher. He acknowledged the introduction with a curt nod, his magical eye scanning the student body in a way that made many shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Mad-Eye Moody," Ron whispered. "Dad talks about him all the time. Most successful dark wizard catcher the Auror office ever had. Bit paranoid in his old age, apparently. He looks like he could teach us a thing or two about defending ourselves," Harry murmured, intrigued by the new professor. If Voldemort's return was truly inevitable, as Dumbledore had claimed, learning from someone with Moody's experience could prove invaluable. Now, to address the hippogriff in the room, McGonagall continued, her expression turning more serious. "The events surrounding former Headmaster Dumbledore have been extensively covered in the media. While I cannot prevent speculation and discussion among you, I will establish certain boundaries." She surveyed the hall with her characteristic stern gaze. "First, the persecution or harassment of any student based on their perceived connection to recent events will not be tolerated. Second, while I encourage healthy academic debate about ethical leadership and magical governance, I will not permit disruption of classes with political grandstanding. And third, any attempt to use these events to bully, intimidate, or exclude any student, particularly those of Muggle birth, will be met with the most severe consequences." At the Slytherin table, Harry noticed several older students exchanging dark looks. Draco Malfoy's expression was carefully neutral, but there was a calculating gleam in his eye that Harry didn't trust. On a related note, McGonagall added, "All students should be aware that the castle's wards and protective enchantments have been thoroughly reviewed and strengthened. Additional security measures have been implemented, including monitoring of all incoming and outgoing mail for dangerous substances or enchantments. These precautions are for your safety and will cause minimal disruption to daily life at Hogwarts." "Mail monitoring?" Hermione whispered, looking concerned. "That seems rather invasive." "Probably because of all the howlers and cursed packages Dumbledore's supporters and detractors might send," Ron suggested. "Dad says the ministry's been swamped with both." Finally, McGonagall said, "I wish to emphasize that despite recent upheavals, Hogwarts remains what it has always been, a place of learning, growth, and community. The actions of one individual, however significant, do not define this institution or its mission. Hogwarts has stood for 1,000 years and will continue to stand, adapting to change while preserving the core values of magical education for all who possess the gift of magic." She allowed herself a rare, small smile. "Now, I believe you are all famished after your journey. Let the feast begin." The tables groaned as food materialized upon them: roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, potatoes prepared in every conceivable manner, vegetables, gravy boats, and more, stretching from end to end. The familiar abundance of a Hogwarts feast, yet the atmosphere felt subtly different, more subdued, perhaps, or simply more aware of the complexities that lay beneath the surface of their magical education. As Harry filled his plate, he was acutely conscious of the continued glances from around the hall. Some students looked at him with obvious curiosity, others with sympathy, and a few, particularly from the Slytherin table, with undisguised suspicion or hostility. "They'll get over it," Ron said through a mouthful of potato, following Harry's gaze. "You're not the only one who was deceived by Dumbledore. Half the wizarding world thought he was infallible." "It's not that," Harry said slowly. I feel like they're waiting for me to do something. To declare a position or pick a side. But I'm still figuring out what all the sides even are." "That's actually quite wise," came a new voice. Harry looked up to find a girl he recognized as one of the Gryffindor chasers, Katie Bell, sliding into a seat across from him. "Sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing. And you're right, everyone's watching to see where the boy who lived stands now that Dumbledore's gone." "I'm not interested in politics," Harry said, somewhat defensively. "I just want to study magic and have a normal school year." Katie smiled sympathetically. "I don't think normal is on the table for you, Harry. Not after everything that's happened. But for what it's worth, you've got allies. The Quidditch team, for one." She nodded toward where Oliver Wood sat with Angelina Johnson and Alicia Spinnet, all of whom gave Harry encouraging nods. "Thanks," Harry said, genuinely touched. "But I haven't even tried out for the team." "Oh, you will," Katie said with certainty. "Wood's been talking about you non-stop since he heard about your flying lesson last week. Something about a 50-foot dive to catch a remembrall." Harry flushed. That was nothing, really, 50 feet. Wood had apparently overheard and leaned in, eyes gleaming with Quidditch-fueled madness. Straight down, perfect control, no broom experience whatsoever. "McGonagall told me herself, before, well, everything else happened. I've already got your name down for seeker trials." "But first years never make the house teams," Hermione objected. "Exception for exceptional talent," Wood replied promptly. "And exceptional circumstances. Our previous seeker graduated, we've no promising candidates in the upper years, and we need every advantage against Slytherin this year. The snakes are out for blood, figuratively speaking," he added hastily, seeing Hermione's expression. "They've been strutting around like they own the place ever since Dumbledore was arrested. Claiming it validates their traditional values or some rubbish." Harry glanced toward the Slytherin table again, where the atmosphere did indeed seem unusually triumphant. Several older students were engaged in animated conversation with Professor Snape, who looked less sour than usual as he listened to them. "Has Snape said anything about, everything that happened?" Harry asked quietly. "He testified at the trial that he'd taken a vow to protect me because of my mother, but he's never actually spoken to me directly." Wood shrugged. "Snape's been Snape-ish as ever. Maybe a bit less openly hostile toward non-Slytherins, but that could just be because McGonagall's watching him like a hawk. The real change is in the Slytherins themselves. They're more organized, more unified than I've ever seen them." "United around what?" Hermione asked. "Power," Katie said simply. "Dumbledore was the great champion of Muggle-born rights and integration. With him disgraced, pure-blood ideology is gaining ground again. Not openly, not yet, but you can feel it." Harry considered this as he continued eating. He'd been so focused on the personal aspects of Dumbledore's manipulations that he hadn't fully appreciated the wider implications. But of course, Dumbledore's fall would create ripples throughout wizarding society, including at Hogwarts itself. As the main course gave way to desserts, Harry found himself approached by a steady stream of well-wishers and curiosity-seekers from all houses except Slytherin. Most expressed awkward sympathy for what he'd endured under Dumbledore's machinations, others asked intrusive questions about the trial or his new living arrangements with Sirius. A few, particularly among the older students, seemed to be testing him for his political views. "My parents always said Dumbledore was too soft on Muggle integration," commented a Ravenclaw sixth year who'd introduced himself as Edward Carmichael. "Not that what he did to you was right, of course, but perhaps some good will come of it if the curriculum returns to proper magical traditions." Before Harry could formulate a response to this thinly veiled pureblood talking point, Percy Weasley appeared at his shoulder, looking official. "That's enough questions for Potter tonight," he declared. "Headmistress McGonagall has specifically instructed that he's to be given space to readjust to school life without interrogation. If you have genuine concerns, you may submit them in writing to your head of house." There were a few grumbles, but the crowd around Harry dispersed, leaving him in relative peace to finish his treacle tart. He shot Percy a grateful look. "Thanks," he said. "I was running out of polite ways to say, none of your business." Percy nodded stiffly. "Just doing my duty." The headmistress was quite clear that you were to be protected from undue attention. He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "My father asked me to let you know that he's available if you ever need assistance from someone in the ministry. He's not highly placed, but he has connections, and he's trustworthy." The offer surprised Harry. "Thank you. That's very kind of him." Percy glanced around to ensure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "There are changes coming, Potter. My father says the ministry is divided, those who believe Dumbledore's claims about you-know-who's potential return, and those who think it was all manipulation to maintain his own power. You'll want to know who stands where." With that cryptic warning, Percy moved on to break up a food fight that had erupted among the new first years, leaving Harry to ponder his words. As the feast concluded, McGonagall rose once more to dismiss the students to their dormitories. Harry followed the familiar path up the moving staircases toward Gryffindor Tower, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Relief at returning to Hogwarts, anxiety about the attention he'd face, determination to learn all he could, and a new wariness about the shifting political landscape around him. The Gryffindor common room was just as he remembered it, warm, comfortable, and inviting, with its squashy armchairs and crackling fire. As the first years were led off to their dormitories, Harry found himself drawn to the window overlooking the grounds, where the lake reflected the starlit sky. Hogwarts had been his first real home, the place where he'd finally felt he belonged. Now he had Grimmauld Place and Sirius too, a family of his own choosing. But Hogwarts still mattered. This castle, with its ancient magic and centuries of tradition, represented everything worth protecting in the wizarding world: learning, community, the nurturing of magical gifts regardless of blood status or background. If Dumbledore's fall threatened that vision, then Harry would need to find his own way to defend it, not as the weapon Dumbledore had tried to forge, but as the person he was choosing to become. "Penny for your thoughts?" Hermione asked, joining him at the window. Harry smiled slightly. "Just thinking that I have more to fight for now than I did 2 weeks ago. More to lose, too." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's how it works when you have people you care about. It makes you stronger, but more vulnerable too." "Yeah," Harry agreed. "Exactly." Beyond the window, the forbidden forest stretched dark and mysterious to the horizon. Somewhere out there, according to Sirius and Remus, Voldemort's spirit lingered, seeking a way to return. Somewhere, Peter Pettigrew hid, perhaps still loyal to his dark master. And in the ministry, in family homes across Britain, in the corridors of Hogwarts itself, battle lines were being drawn in a conflict most didn't even recognize yet. But Harry recognized it. And this time, he would face it with his eyes open, his magic unbound, and people he trusted at his side. Whatever came next, he would be ready. Chapter 3, Rising from Ashes. October arrived at Hogwarts in a swirl of crimson and gold, the forbidden forest transforming into a tapestry of autumn colors that reflected gloriously in the black lake. For Harry Potter, standing on the Quidditch pitch with the wind rushing through his hair, the world felt different than it had just 1 month earlier. Not perfect, far from it, but undeniably his own. "Dive, Potter. Dive now." Oliver Wood bellowed from 50 feet below, where he hovered near the goal hoops. Harry didn't hesitate. He tipped his Nimbus 2000, a gift from Sirius that had arrived with a note reading simply, "Your father would insist," into a near-vertical plunge. The ground rushed toward him, wind whistling past his ears, but Harry felt only exhilaration. Since the Horcrux's removal and the breaking of Dumbledore's bindings, his magic responded differently, more intuitively, more powerfully. He could feel it humming beneath his skin as he flew, connecting him to the broom in a way that made complex maneuvers feel like second nature. 30 feet from impact, Harry spotted the glint of gold he was hunting. 20 feet. 10. With a precision that drew gasps from the watching team, he leveled out and snatched the practice snitch from the air, his knuckles brushing the frost-tipped grass. Merlin Saggy, Fred, or George, began. "That was brilliant," his twin finished. Wood flew down to meet Harry as he touched down, looking like a man who'd just witnessed a religious miracle. Potter, that was. I've never seen, you're going to win us the cup. He seized Harry by the shoulders, eyes wild with Quidditch fervor. We play Slytherin next Saturday. Are you ready? Harry grinned, the euphoria of flight still coursing through him. Born ready. That's what I like to hear. Wood released him, turning to address the entire team. All right, everyone, that's it for today. Rest up, and remember, no risks before the match. I want all of you healthy and in top form. Potter, I want you studying those seeker plays I gave you. As the team dispersed toward the changing rooms, Harry lingered on the pitch, reluctant to return to the castle just yet. These training sessions had become his sanctuary, the one place where he was judged solely on skill and not by his connection to the Dumbledore scandal, his fame as the boy who lived, or the growing political divisions within the school. Admiring the view, Harry? Katie Bell asked, joining him. Her cheeks were flushed from exertion, her breath misting in the cool air. Just thinking how much I love flying, he admitted. It's the one thing that feels completely mine. Katie nodded understanding. For what it's worth, you fly like you were born on a broom. Wood says you're better than Charlie Weasley was, and he could have played for England. Harry felt his face warm at the praise. Thanks. How are things with the older students? Any change? Katie's expression turned more serious. Same as last week. The Ravenclaws are splitting into factions, the traditionalists versus the progressives. Hufflepuff's mostly unified behind Diggory, who's keeping them neutral but inclusive. And Slytherin. She trailed off. Still rallying behind Malfoy? Harry asked, though he knew the answer. Behind what he represents, at least. Wealthy purebloods taking back control now that Dumbledore's gone. She hefted her broom over her shoulder. Come on, it's freezing out here. Race you to the changing rooms? Harry appreciated her attempt to lighten the mood. You're on. They sprinted across the pitch, laughing as they dodged frozen puddles. For that moment at least, the complexities of Hogwarts politics seemed far away. But the moment couldn't last forever. Mobiliarbus, Hermione pronounced carefully, her wand executing the precise movement Professor Flitwick had demonstrated. The small potted plant before her rose 6 inches into the air, wobbled briefly, then settled into a stable hover. Excellent work, Miss Granger. 5 points to Gryffindor. Professor Flitwick beamed at her from atop his stack of books. Now, who else would like to try? Mr. Potter, perhaps? Harry, who had been absently doodling Quidditch plays in the margin of his notes, straightened. Yes, Professor. He pointed his wand at his own plant, focusing on the spell. Mobiliarbus. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Instead of rising gently, Harry's plant shot toward the ceiling as if fired from a cannon, shedding leaves as it went. It struck the stone ceiling with a thud, then plummeted back down. Harry hastily cast a cushioning charm, a 4th-year spell Remus had taught him, preventing the pot from shattering on impact. The class erupted in a mixture of gasps, laughter, and excited murmurs. Flitwick himself looked momentarily stunned before recovering his composure. Well. That was certainly energetic, Mr. Potter. Perhaps a bit less power next time. He peered at Harry with scholarly interest. Your magic seems remarkably responsive. Are you finding this to be the case in all your classes? Harry nodded, embarrassed by the attention. The truth was, controlling his unbound magic had proven challenging across all his subjects. In Transfiguration, he'd accidentally turned a match not just into a needle but into an intricately carved silver darning needle that Professor Burbage had kept as a demonstration piece. In herbology, plants seemed to grow several inches when he tended them. Even in History of Magic, ghostly illustrations had begun appearing above his parchment as he took notes, depicting the events Binns was droning on about. I'm still getting used to it, Harry admitted. Sir, could I stay after class for some advice? Flitwick nodded enthusiastically. Certainly, Mr. Potter. I'd be delighted to help. From the Slytherin side of the classroom, Draco Malfoy muttered something that made Crabbe and Goyle snigger. Harry didn't need to hear the exact words to recognize the jealousy and resentment in their tone. It had become a familiar undercurrent in his interactions with the Slytherins since his return. Hermione gave Harry an encouraging smile as they returned to their practice. "It's getting better," she whispered. "Last week you sent 3 plants through the window, remember?" "Progress," Harry agreed with a wry grin. When the class ended, Harry approached Flitwick's desk while the other students filed out. Ron and Hermione lingered by the door, waiting for him. "You two go ahead," Harry called to them. "I'll catch up at lunch." Hermione nodded, dragging a reluctant Ron away. They'd become an inseparable trio in the weeks since Harry's return, but his friends had also learned to give him space when he needed it, particularly for conversations about his magic. "Now then, Mr. Potter," Flitwick said, gesturing for Harry to take a seat. "I understand you're experiencing some difficulty calibrating your magical output." Harry nodded, grateful for Flitwick's matter-of-fact approach. Unlike some professors who treated him with awkward sympathy or excessive curiosity since the revelations about Dumbledore, Flitwick remained professionally focused on his education. "It's like..." Harry searched for the right words. "Like I've been writing with my non-dominant hand for years, and suddenly I can use my good hand, but I keep pressing too hard and tearing the parchment." Flitwick's eyes lit up at the analogy. "A very apt description. What you're experiencing is quite common when magical bindings are removed, though admittedly most cases involve short-term bindings, not ones placed in infancy." He shook his head, momentary anger flashing across his features. "Absolutely unconscionable, what Dumbledore did. But let's focus on solutions, shall we?" The diminutive professor hopped down from his stack of books and rummaged through a drawer. "What you need, Mr. Potter, is not to suppress your magic, that would be counterproductive, but to develop finer control. Precision exercises." He produced a small wooden box. "This contains a set of practice tools developed for young wizards and witches showing signs of exceptional magical strength. Normally used in private tutoring scenarios, but I believe they'll serve you well." He opened the box to reveal an assortment of curious objects: crystalline spheres of various sizes, metal rings, feathers dyed in rainbow hues, and tiny clockwork mechanisms. "The basic principle is progressive resistance," Flitwick explained, lifting one of the spheres. "You begin with simple levitation, but these objects are enchanted to provide increasing magical resistance as you demonstrate control. Master one level, and you proceed to the next. 20 minutes of practice each day should yield noticeable improvement within a week." Harry accepted the box gratefully. "Thank you, Professor." "Think nothing of it." Flitwick hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "If I may speak candidly, Mr. Potter, your case has provoked considerable discussion among the faculty. The magical potential you're displaying now that the bindings are removed is significant. Professor McGonagall believes you may have inherited your father's talent for transfiguration along with your mother's gift for charms." "You knew my mother?" Harry asked eagerly. Flitwick beamed. "Lily Evans was one of my most brilliant students. She had a particular affinity for charm creation, modifying existing spells or developing new ones. Her new project on emotion-responsive protective enchantments was published in Challenges in Charming. I believe I have a copy somewhere, if you'd be interested." "I would," Harry said immediately. "Very interested." The professor nodded, pleased. "I'll find it for you. Now, there is one more matter." His expression grew more serious. "Professor Moody has requested permission to offer you additional defense training, outside regular class hours. As your head of house, Professor Sinistra has approved this, pending your agreement." Harry felt a surge of excitement. Defense against the dark arts had quickly become his favorite subject under Moody's intense, practical instruction. While other professors treated Harry with caution after the Horcrux removal, Moody had immediately recognized and challenged his expanded capabilities. "Extra defense training?" Yes, absolutely, Harry agreed. Excellent. I believe he wishes to begin this evening. 8 o'clock in the defense classroom. Flitwick smiled. Now, off to lunch with you. Growing wizards need their sustenance. Harry hurried from the classroom, the box of practice tools tucked under his arm, feeling more optimistic than he had in days. Between Quidditch, his improving magical control, and now additional defense training with Moody, he was beginning to see a path forward, a way to transform himself from Dumbledore's unwitting pawn into someone capable of facing whatever challenges lay ahead. As he rounded a corner toward the Great Hall, he nearly collided with Professor Snape, who was emerging from a side corridor with an armful of scrolls. Potter. Snape snapped reflexively, then visibly checked himself. Mind your surroundings. Sorry, Professor, Harry said automatically, braced for the usual cutting remark about his father or his celebrity status. But Snape merely gave him an inscrutable look, his dark eyes lingering on Harry's face, or more specifically, on his faded scar. The potions master had been a puzzle since Harry's return. Still stern and demanding in class, but lacking the personal venom he'd initially displayed. He neither acknowledged the revelations from the trial nor made any reference to his vow to protect Harry out of love for Lily. Professor, Harry said impulsively as Snape made to continue on his way, could I ask you something? About my mother? Snape froze, his back to Harry. For a moment, Harry thought he might ignore the question entirely or respond with his customary sarcasm. But when he turned, his expression was carefully neutral. What about her? The words were clipped but not hostile. Professor Flitwick mentioned she was talented at creating and modifying charms, Harry said carefully. I was wondering, what else was she good at? Besides potions, I mean. He knew from comments in class that Lily had been skilled in Snape's subject. Something flickered in Snape's eyes, pain, perhaps, or memory. Your mother excelled in most subjects she applied herself to, Potter. Her particular strengths were charms, potions, and ancient runes. He hesitated, then added reluctantly, she had a gift for seeing connections between different branches of magic that others missed. It made her innovative. Harry absorbed this hungrily, storing away this new fragment of information about his mother. Thank you, sir. Snape gave a curt nod. If that's all. Actually, Harry pressed his luck, there is one more thing. I've been reading about magical oaths and life debts. The kind of oath you made to protect me, because of my mother, is that why you've been different since I came back? Snape's expression darkened. My personal motivations are not a suitable topic for corridor discussions, Potter. Suffice it to say that recent events have clarified certain priorities. He fixed Harry with a penetrating stare. I neither require your gratitude nor your understanding. I do, however, expect improved performance in my class now that your magical capabilities are unhindered. With that, he swept past Harry, robes billowing behind him. Despite the abrupt dismissal, Harry felt oddly encouraged by the exchange. It wasn't friendly, certainly, but it was the longest non-hostile conversation he'd ever had with Snape. And he'd learned something new about his mother, another piece in the puzzle of who she had been. He continued to the Great Hall with a lighter step, unaware that he was being observed from the shadows by a pair of cold gray eyes. Again, Potter. Your opponent won't give you time to gather your wits. Harry ducked as a stinging hex sizzled past his ear, then rolled to his right, coming up with a shield charm that deflected Moody's follow-up curse. 2 weeks into their private training sessions, and the ex-Auror still managed to push him to his limits every time. Expelliarmus. Harry countered, putting enough force behind the spell to make it challenging to block, but not enough to cause the destructive effects his unbound magic was capable of when unleashed fully. Moody deflected it with a casual flick of his wand. Better. You're learning to calibrate. Now, combination attacks, just like we practiced. Harry launched into the sequence they'd been drilling, disarming charm to impediment jinx to stunning spell, moving constantly as he cast. Moody blocked each spell but gave an approving nod at Harry's improved execution. Good. Very good. Take a break, lad. You've earned it. Harry sank gratefully onto a bench, accepting the water flask Moody offered him. The defense classroom had been transformed for their evening sessions, with desks pushed against walls and training dummies positioned around the room. Moody had also added a collection of dark detectors, sneakoscopes, secrecy sensors, and a large, cloudy faux glass that dominated one wall. You're making progress, Potter, Moody said, his magical eye swiveling independently of his normal one to survey the room. Both in control and in combat awareness. Still telegraphing your moves a bit, but that'll improve with practice. Thank you, sir, Harry said between gulps of water. These sessions had quickly become the highlight of his week, challenging, occasionally painful, but immensely satisfying. Moody treated him neither as a celebrity nor as a victim, but as a student with genuine potential. Time to advance your training, Moody declared, stumping over to a trunk in the corner. You've got decent defensive skills for your age. Time to work on more, specialized countermeasures. Harry straightened, intrigued. What kind of countermeasures? The kind you need when facing mental manipulation. Moody tapped the trunk with his wand, and it sprang open to reveal a stone basin etched with runes, a pensieve. Dumbledore wasn't the only wizard capable of mental intrusion, Potter. And with your particular destiny, you need to be prepared. Harry stiffened at the mention of destiny. You believe in the prophecy, then? That I have to face Voldemort? Moody's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. Not afraid to say the name. Good. He settled on a chair across from Harry, his wooden leg stretched out before him. I believe the Dark Lord will return. I believe he'll come after you when he does. Whether that's destiny or just the logical consequence of your history with him is academic. You need to be ready either way. It was a more straightforward answer than Harry had received from most adults when he raised the topic. Sirius and Remus tended to emphasize that prophecies were ambiguous and often self-fulfilling. McGonagall insisted his only obligation was to focus on his education. Even Amelia Bones, who had visited Hogwarts twice to check on his progress, had been evasive about her views on the prophecy. So what are you teaching me? Harry asked, eyeing the pensieve. Occlumency, Moody replied. The art of protecting your mind against external penetration. Dumbledore was a skilled legilimens, could read thoughts, access memories, even plant suggestions. So is Snape. And so was Voldemort. Harry's stomach churned at the implications. Are you saying Dumbledore read my mind? Regularly? The Sorting Hat certainly thought so, Moody confirmed grimly. And based on evidence found in his pensieve during the investigation, he was monitoring your thoughts throughout your first week at Hogwarts. Might have been doing it for years before that. The violation felt deeply personal, even after everything else he'd learned about Dumbledore's manipulations. Harry's hands clenched into fists. How do I stop that from happening again? That's the spirit. Moody tapped the pensieve. First, you need to understand what you're defending against. I've got authorization from Bones to show you some memories, evidence from the trial that wasn't made public. Seeing Dumbledore's techniques will help you recognize and counter similar intrusions. Harry hesitated, unsure if he wanted to see more of Dumbledore's betrayal. But knowledge was power, and he'd promised himself he would never be an unwitting pawn again. All right. Show me. Moody stirred the silvery contents of the pensieve with his wand. This first memory is from Dumbledore's own collection. It shows him modifying your relative's behavior when you were 7 years old. Subtle work, not full control, just nudges. Harry leaned forward as figures began to materialize above the pensieve, like a three-dimensional projection. He recognized Privet Drive, the immaculate front garden of number 4, and then, Dumbledore himself, wearing a somber grey suit that almost passed for Muggle clothing, approaching the front door under a disillusionment charm that rendered him nearly invisible. The memory showed Dumbledore entering the house silently, finding the Dursleys at dinner. 7-year-old Harry was absent, probably in his cupboard, Harry realized. With precise, subtle wand movements, Dumbledore cast spells on each Dursley in turn. Not obvious curses, but delicate, almost invisible threads of magic that sank beneath their skin. Compulsion enchantments, Moody narrated as Harry watched in horrified fascination. He's reinforcing their worst tendencies toward you while suppressing any inclination toward kindness or attachment. Look at the wand work, textbook manipulation. Illegal as hell, of course, but he was always careful to leave no trace. Why? Harry whispered. Why would he want them to hate me? To ensure you'd bond to the wizarding world completely when you finally discovered it, Moody said bluntly. Classic cult recruitment tactic, isolate the target from healthy relationships, then appear as the rescuer. He needed you grateful, malleable, and willing to embrace whatever role he assigned you. The memory shifted, showing a different scene, Dumbledore in his office at Hogwarts, speaking with Professor McGonagall. This memory seemed older, possibly from before Harry was born. The prophecy gives us an opportunity, Minerva, memory Dumbledore was saying, stroking his beard thoughtfully. A weapon uniquely positioned to vanquish Voldemort. A weapon? Memory McGonagall looked disturbed. Albus, we're talking about an unborn child. A child with a destiny, Dumbledore corrected gently. One who will need guidance to fulfill their purpose. The greater good demands certain sacrifices. The memory dissolved, replaced by another, Dumbledore examining baby Harry in the ruins of Godric's Hollow, his expression clinical as he studied the lightning-shaped wound. A Horcrux, he murmured to himself. How fascinating. This changes everything. A pause, then, the boy must die at the right moment, by Voldemort's hand. It's the only way. Harry felt sick watching these fragments of Dumbledore's plotting. The casual way he discussed Harry's death, the years of manipulation, all in service to his interpretation of the prophecy. Enough, he said hoarsely as the pensieve began to show yet another memory. I get the point. Moody waved his wand, and the images disappeared. Unpleasant, I know. But necessary for you to understand what we're defending against. Dumbledore wasn't evil in the conventional sense, Potter. He genuinely believed he was serving the greater good. That makes his type more dangerous than simple dark wizards. They justify anything in service to their vision. Could he have been right? Harry asked the question that had been haunting him. About the Horcrux, about me needing to die to defeat Voldemort? No, Moody said flatly. We know that for certain now. The Department of Mysteries analyzed the Horcrux after its removal. It could have been extracted years ago with minimal risk. Dumbledore either didn't research alternatives thoroughly or deliberately ignored them because they didn't fit his narrative. Relief washed through Harry. He'd been told this before, by the healers and by Sirius, but hearing it from Moody, a hardened Auror with no reason to coddle him, made it more believable. Now, Moody continued, all business again, a clemency. The basic principle is creating barriers around your thoughts, not rigid walls, which can be broken, but misdirection, false paths, and controlled access. You've already got a natural advantage. I do? Harry asked, surprised. The Sorting Hat created a framework when it helped expel the Horcrux. That golden feather in your mindscape, you've seen it? Harry nodded, remembering the gift Fawkes had left in his mental library during the Horcrux removal ritual. How do you know about that? Monitored the procedure as Ministry security, Moody explained. That feather is a foundation for your defenses. We'll build on it. Close your eyes and find your mindscape. Harry obeyed, slipping more easily into the mental visualization than he'd expected. His mindscape appeared as it had during the ritual, a vast library with shelves extending in all directions. But changes had occurred in the weeks since. The once corrupted corner had been completely restored, the books reorganized, and new sections had appeared, reflecting his recent experiences and learning. At the center of it all, on what appeared to be the main desk, lay the golden phoenix feather, glowing with a soft inner light. "I'm there," Harry said, keeping his eyes closed. "Good. Now, imagine the feather expanding its influence, tendrils of gold light extending to create a network throughout your mental space. This is your early warning system, your first line of defense. When someone attempts legilimency, these tendrils will vibrate, alerting you to the intrusion." Harry concentrated, visualizing exactly what Moody described. To his surprise, the feather responded, pulsing brighter as filaments of golden light spread outward along the shelves and through the aisles of his mental library. "It's working," he murmured, amazed. "Excellent. Now for the test. I'm going to attempt a very gentle probe, nothing invasive, just a touch on the outer edges of your consciousness. Try to feel the warning system activate, then push back against my presence." Harry tensed, unsure what to expect. Moments later, he felt it, a slight pressure against his mindscape, like someone testing a door handle. Immediately, the golden network he'd created flared with light, highlighting the point of intrusion. Instinctively, Harry pushed back, imagining the golden light condensing into a shield at the threatened point. The pressure vanished. "Well done." Moody sounded genuinely impressed when Harry opened his eyes. "First attempt, and you've already managed a basic defense. The hat was right about your potential." Harry blinked, readjusting to the physical world. "That didn't seem too difficult." "It will be when the intruder isn't announcing themselves and deliberately going easy on you," Moody warned. "But you've got good instincts. We'll develop them further in our next sessions." He checked his pocket watch. "Nearly curfew. One more thing before you go." The ex-Auror reached into his coat and withdrew a small mirror in a simple wooden frame. From Black. Two-way communication mirror. He's got the match. Just say his name while holding it, and you can speak face to face. Useful for emergencies or just keeping in touch without the male screening picking it up. Harry accepted the mirror reverently, recognizing it as a precious connection to his godfather. "Thank you for passing it along." Moody waved off his thanks. "Constant vigilance, Potter. Communication channels that can't be monitored are essential in uncertain times." His magical eye swiveled toward the door. "Now off with you before Filch starts prowling." Harry tucked the mirror safely into his robes and gathered his things. At the door, he paused. "Professor? Do you think Dumbledore still has supporters at Hogwarts? People who might try to continue his plans?" Moody's expression turned grave. "Without doubt. And others with their own agendas taking advantage of the power vacuum. Watch yourself, Potter. Not everyone who smiles at you is a friend, and not everyone who scowls is an enemy." He tapped his magical eye meaningfully. "Remember that." The warning followed Harry through the darkened corridors as he made his way back to Gryffindor Tower, the weight of the mirror against his chest a comforting reminder that he wasn't truly alone. "Remind me again why we're doing this," Ron whispered as they huddled under the invisibility cloak, making their way through the moonlit corridors toward the library's restricted section. "Because someone's trying to access the Chamber of Secrets, and we need to figure out what it is before they succeed," Hermione replied, her voice equally hushed. It was nearly midnight in late October, and the trio was on a mission sparked by a series of disturbing events. First had come the message scrawled in what looked like blood on a second-floor corridor: "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." The very next day, Filch's cat, Mrs. Norris, had been found petrified, not dead, but frozen in a state of rigid terror. The school had erupted in fearful speculation. Ancient legends about Slytherin's secret chamber and the monster within had resurfaced, along with ugly whispers about who qualified as enemies of the air, usually focusing on Muggle-born students. For Harry, the timing was too suspicious to ignore. Dobby had warned about Lucius Malfoy's plans involving a diary and a chamber. Now, with Dumbledore gone and the school in transition, someone was making their move. "We could have just asked McGonagall about the chamber," Ron grumbled as they reached the library doors. Or bins. He probably droned on about it in class while we were napping. We did ask, Hermione reminded him. They all said the chamber is a myth, but something petrified Mrs. Norris. And I found references to a similar incident 50 years ago, but all the specific details have been removed from the regular library. Harry carefully pushed open the door, wincing at its faint creak. Besides, I told you what Sirius said when I contacted him through the mirror. The last time the chamber was supposedly opened, a Muggle-born student died. The Ministry tried to cover it up, but his father heard rumors about it from his parents. The library was eerily silent, moonlight streaming through high windows to cast long shadows across the reading tables. They moved cautiously toward the rope separating the main library from the restricted section. If Malfoy's father is behind this, Ron whispered, why not just tell Madame Bones? You've got a direct line to her, don't you? Without proof, it's just speculation, Harry replied, lifting the rope for them to duck under. And Malfoy's too smart to be caught easily. We need to understand what we're dealing with first. The restricted section loomed before them, shelves filled with books that seemed to radiate dark energy. Some were chained to the shelves, others locked behind small grates. A few appeared to be watching them, their spines shifting slightly as the trio passed. Ancient Hogwarts legends and lore, Hermione murmured, scanning the shelves methodically. It should be in this section. What exactly are we looking for? Ron asked, eyeing a book that appeared to be bound in some sort of scaly hide. Anything about the chamber's creation, its purpose, or most importantly, what kind of monster might be inside it, Hermione replied. If we know what we're facing, we can figure out how to stop it. Harry moved deeper into the stacks, drawn to a section marked Founders Era Histories. As he examined the titles, his invisibility cloak slipped slightly, exposing his hand. Immediately, one of the books reacted, its cover glowing briefly before it edged forward on the shelf as if trying to get his attention. Guys, Harry whispered, I think I found something. Ron and Hermione joined him as he carefully pulled out the book, a massive tome bound in faded green leather with silver clasps. The title, embossed in tarnished silver, read, Serpent Secrets, The Hidden History of Salazar Slytherin. Perfect, Hermione breathed. They carried the book to a reading table in the darkest corner of the restricted section, still huddled beneath the cloak despite the near-zero chance of discovery at this hour. When Harry opened the cover, the pages began to turn on their own, as if the book itself were searching for specific information. They finally stopped on a chapter titled The Chamber and Its Guardian. The three friends leaned forward eagerly, only to discover the text was written in an unfamiliar script. What language is that? Ron asked, squinting at the angular characters. It's not a language, Harry said slowly, the realization dawning. It's Parseltongue. Look at the way the symbols curve, they're stylized snakes. Hermione looked at him in amazement. Can you read it? Harry stared at the text, focusing on the snake-like symbols. To his surprise, they seemed to shift and transform before his eyes, the serpentine characters rearranging themselves into English letters. Yes, he said, slightly awed by this discovery. It's becoming clear to me. That's brilliant. Ron exclaimed, then immediately lowered his voice when Hermione shushed him. Sorry. But it is. What does it say? Harry began to read aloud in a hushed voice, My chamber of secrets shall remain sealed until my true heir returns to purge the school of those unworthy to study magic. Within waits my faithful servant and deadliest creation, the basilisk, king of serpents, whose gaze brings death and whose venom dissolves all but the most enchanted materials. A basilisk? Hermione gasped. That's incredibly dangerous. Its direct gaze kills instantly. That explains the petrifications, Harry said, continuing to scan the text. It says here that seeing a basilisk's reflection or its gaze through another medium causes petrification instead of death. Mrs. Norris must have seen its reflection in the water from the flooded bathroom. But how is it moving around the castle without being seen? Ron asked. A giant snake would be a bit obvious in the corridors, wouldn't it? Harry turned the page, finding a detailed diagram of Hogwarts with lines traced through its walls. Pipes. The basilisk uses the plumbing system to move throughout the school. That's why Harry can hear it in the walls. I'm hearing Parseltongue without realizing it. The entrance must be in a bathroom, Hermione deduced. That's why the message was nearby, and why the floor was flooded. The second-floor girls' lavatory, the one with moaning Myrtle. The ghost? Ron asked. Hermione nodded excitedly. She died 50 years ago. What if she was the victim last time the chamber was opened? Killed by the basilisk? The pieces were falling into place with alarming speed. Harry continued reading, finding confirmation of their theories along with additional details about the basilisk's weaknesses. The crow of a rooster was fatal to it, and the chamber's protections, only a Parselmouth could open it. So Slytherin's heir, whoever it is a Parselmouth who's using the basilisk to attack Muggleborns, Harry summarized grimly. And based on Dobby's warning, Lucius Malfoy is behind it somehow, probably using that diary he mentioned. But Malfoy isn't at Hogwarts, Hermione pointed out. And Draco isn't a Parselmouth, as far as we know. The diary, Harry said suddenly. Sirius told me there are dark artifacts that can possess people, control their actions. What if the diary is something like that? Malfoy could have slipped it to someone at Hogwarts. Ron paled. Like my sister. She's been acting strange lately, quiet, withdrawn. And she was shopping in Diagon Alley the same day we saw Malfoy at Flourish and Blotts. A chill ran down Harry's spine. We need to find that diary. The sound of approaching footsteps cut their discussion short. Hastily closing the book, they slipped back under the invisibility cloak completely and froze as the library doors opened. To their surprise, it wasn't Filch or a professor who entered, but Ginny Weasley, Ron's sister. She moved with an odd, gliding walk that seemed unnatural for the normally energetic first year. That's not right, Ron whispered, so quietly Harry barely heard him. That's not how Ginny moves. They watched in growing horror as Ginny, or whatever was controlling her, walked directly to a specific shelf in the main library section. Without hesitation, she selected a book, opened it to remove several pages, then carefully replaced the book as if it had never been disturbed. The torn pages disappeared into her robes. She's sleepwalking, Hermione breathed. Or possessed, Harry finished grimly. The diary. As silently as she had come, Ginny turned and left the library, her movements still unsettlingly fluid and purposeful. We have to follow her, Ron said immediately, starting forward. Harry grabbed his arm. Wait. If it is the diary possessing her, confronting her directly could be dangerous, for her and for us. We need a plan. Harry's right, Hermione agreed reluctantly. Let's get back to the common room and contact Sirius through the mirror. He'll know who to inform and how to handle this safely. Ron looked torn, clearly desperate to help his sister but understanding the wisdom in their caution. Fine. But we move fast. I don't like the idea of that thing controlling Ginny for even one more night. They hurried back to Gryffindor Tower, their discovery about the basilisk now compounded by the apparent confirmation of Dobby's warning. The mysterious diary was indeed at Hogwarts, and it had found a victim in Ginny Weasley. In the safety of the deserted common room, Harry retrieved the two-way mirror from his trunk and called for Sirius. His godfather's face appeared almost immediately, looking alert despite the late hour. Harry? What's wrong? Are you okay? The concern in his voice was palpable. I'm fine, but we have a situation, Harry replied, angling the mirror so Ron and Hermione were visible too. Quickly, he explained everything they'd discovered, the chamber, the basilisk, and now Ginny's apparent possession. Sirius's expression grew increasingly grave as he listened. This is serious dark magic. A diary that can possess someone sounds like more than just an enchanted object. It could be another Horcrux. Another one? Harry felt sick at the implication. Like what was in my scar? Possibly. Dumbledore theorized that Voldemort made multiple Horcruxes. That's part of what the Unspeakables have been investigating since his trial. Sirius ran a hand through his hair. Listen carefully. Do not approach Ginny alone. Do not try to take the diary yourselves. This needs to be handled by professionals. But she's my sister. Ron protested. And we want to keep her safe, Sirius countered firmly. I'm contacting Amelia Bones and Remus immediately. They'll alert McGonagall, and we'll have a team at Hogwarts by morning. Horcrux removal is delicate work, attempting it without proper preparation could harm Ginny. What do we do until then? Hermione asked. Keep an eye on Ginny from a distance, Sirius instructed. If she appears to be heading toward the chamber, which is likely in the second-floor girls' lavatory, based on what you've told me, delay her somehow. Create a commotion, get a professor, anything to prevent her from releasing the basilisk again. But do not confront her directly about the diary or the possession. We understand, Harry said, though he could see Ron's frustration. Just, hurry. We will. And Harry? Sirius's expression softened slightly. Well done, all of you. You've connected dots that the adults missed. Now let us handle the dangerous part, all right? After ending the call, the trio sat in silence for a moment, processing the gravity of the situation. Then Ron stood up, determination etched on his face. I'm going to check if Ginny's in her dormitory, he declared. Just to make sure she's safe for tonight. The stairs will turn into a slide if you try to go up to the girls' dorms, Hermione reminded him. I know that. I'll get one of her roommates to check. Probably wake up half the first-year girls, but I don't care. He marched toward the staircase. He's really worried, Hermione observed after he'd gone. Wouldn't you be? Harry asked. If it were your sister being used by Voldemort's diary to set a basilisk on people? Hermione shuddered. When you put it that way. I just hope Sirius and the others get here in time. If the diary is another Horcrux, who knows what it's doing to Ginny the longer she has it? Harry nodded grimly. They'd discovered the chamber's secret, but the real challenge still lay ahead, saving Ginny and stopping the basilisk before anyone was killed. And beneath those immediate concerns lurked a deeper, more troubling question: why had Lucius Malfoy orchestrated this attack now, with Dumbledore already removed from Hogwarts? The answer, Harry suspected, would prove even more disturbing than the questions. Dawn had barely broken when McGonagall's amplified voice echoed throughout Gryffindor Tower: all students are to remain in their dormitories until further notice. Prefects, please take attendance and report any absences immediately to your head of house. This is not a drill. Harry, who had barely slept, was already dressed and waiting in the common room with Ron. They'd taken turns keeping watch during the night, but Ginny hadn't emerged from the first-year girls' dormitory. According to her roommate, she was sleeping peacefully, though the girl had mentioned Ginny seemed to always have a small black book with her lately. They're here, Harry told Ron as Percy burst into the common room, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Sirius and the ministry team. Percy began taking attendance with military efficiency, his voice strained as he called out names. When he reached Ginny Weasley and received confirmation she was present, his shoulders sagged visibly with relief. You told him? Harry whispered to Ron. Ron nodded. Just the basics. That we suspect Ginny's been given a dark artifact and needed help. He didn't ask many questions, just went straight to McGonagall's office. Hermione joined them, her hair even bushier than usual from a restless night. Any news? Before they could answer, the portrait hole swung open to admit Professor Sinistra, their head of house. The normally reserved astronomy professor looked deadly serious as she surveyed the common room. Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger. Please come with me. And Miss Weasley as well, she added, her gaze moving to the first-year girls' staircase where Ginny had just appeared, looking pale and confused. Professor? Percy stepped forward. What's happening? Why do you need my sister? Official Hogwarts business, Mr. Weasley, Sinistra replied smoothly. Your sister is not in trouble. This is merely a precautionary measure related to recent events. Please continue your duties here. Percy looked torn but ultimately nodded, his prefect training winning out over brotherly concern. Ginny approached timidly, her small face drawn with anxiety. Harry studied her closely, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the way she clutched her robes protectively around herself, probably hiding the diary. Am I in trouble? She asked in a small voice. Not at all, Miss Weasley, Sinistra assured her. The headmistress simply needs to speak with you and these three. Please follow me. As they followed Sinistra through the corridors, Harry noticed the castle was eerily quiet, with portraits watching them intently as they passed. Even the ghosts seemed to be keeping their distance. The rest of the school is still confined to dormitories, then? Hermione asked. Yes, Miss Granger. A necessary precaution while certain issues are being resolved. Sinistra's tone made it clear she wouldn't elaborate further as they walked. They reached the entrance to McGonagall's office, formerly Dumbledore's, and Sinistra provided the password, feline fortitude. The gargoyle leapt aside, revealing the spiral staircase beyond. Up you go, Sinistra directed. They're expecting you. The office had changed significantly since Harry's brief glimpse of it during Dumbledore's tenure. Gone were the whirring silver instruments and collection of obscure magical artifacts. Instead, the circular room now featured organized bookshelves, a large star chart on one wall, and a modest desk where McGonagall sat. The portraits of previous headmasters remained, though Dumbledore's was conspicuously absent, either not yet created or deliberately not displayed. The room was crowded with people, McGonagall behind the desk, Sirius and Remus standing nearby, Amelia Bones with two unspeakables in their characteristic hooded robes, Madame Pomfrey looking prepared for a medical emergency, and Professor Moody, his magical eye fixed unblinkingly on Ginny. Ah, there you are, McGonagall said, rising. Thank you for coming promptly. Ginny shrank back at the sight of so many authority figures, her hand moving defensively to her pocket. Harry noticed Moody and the unspeakables tensing at the movement. What's happening? Ginny asked, her voice trembling. Why are all these people here? Sirius stepped forward, his manner deliberately casual. Nothing to worry about, Ginny. We just need to check something. You haven't been feeling quite yourself lately, have you? Ginny's eyes widened. I've been tired, that's all. First year is hard. Of course it is, Sirius agreed sympathetically. But sometimes when we're tired, we might pick up something that's not good for us. Like a certain diary, perhaps. The change in Ginny was immediate and disturbing. Her posture stiffened, her expression hardened, and when she spoke, her voice carried an undertone that wasn't her own, deeper, colder, more mature. You know nothing, she, or whatever was speaking through her, hissed. The diary is mine. He understands me. He's my friend. That's not Ginny, Ron whispered, horrified. No, it's not, one of the unspeakables confirmed. The possession is progressing rapidly. We need to act now. McGonagall addressed Ginny directly, her voice firm but kind. Miss Weasley, we're here to help you. The diary you've been writing in is a very dark magical object. It's been influencing your actions, making you do things you wouldn't normally do, like opening the Chamber of Secrets. Ginny's face contorted in a sneer so unlike her normal expression that Harry barely recognized her. The chamber is my birthright, she said in that disturbing dual voice. The cleansing has begun, and none of you can stop it. My basilisk will rid this school of mudblood filth once and for all. That's quite enough, Tom, said the second unspeakable, stepping forward. We know who and what you are. Ginny, or rather, the entity controlling her, whirled to face the unspeakable, eyes widening. "How dare you address me by that name? I am Lord Voldemort, the greatest sorcerer who ever lived." "You're a memory preserved in a diary," the unspeakable replied calmly. "A fragment of Tom Riddle's soul embedded in an object. A Horcrux, like the one we removed from Mr. Potter." The mention of Harry seemed to draw the entity's attention. Ginny's possessed gaze fixed on him with burning intensity. "Potter," she spat. "The boy who somehow defeated my true self. How fitting that you should witness my return." In a blindingly fast movement, Ginny drew the diary from her pocket along with her wand. But before she could cast any spell, Moody's stunning spell hit her squarely in the chest. She collapsed, the diary falling from her limp fingers. One of the unspeakables immediately conjured a spelled containment box and levitated the diary into it, sealing it with complex wand movements. "Is she okay?" Ron demanded, rushing to his sister's side. "She'll be fine, Mr. Weasley," Madame Pomfrey assured him, already examining the unconscious girl. The stunning spell was necessary to separate her from the diary's influence safely. "She'll need rest and monitoring, but I anticipate a full recovery now that the source of the possession has been contained." Harry stared at the sealed box containing the diary, feeling the same sense of wrongness he'd experienced around the Horcrux in his scar. "It's him, isn't it? A piece of Voldemort, just like what was in me." "Yes," confirmed one of the unspeakables, pulling back their hood to reveal a woman with close-cropped silver hair and penetrating blue eyes. "A Horcrux, created when Riddle was still a student here, using the death of Myrtle Warren to split his soul. The first of several, we now believe." "The diary was controlling Ginny," Hermione said, making her open the chamber and release the basilisk. "Precisely, Miss Granger," McGonagall said. "And thanks to your research and quick action, we've been able to intervene before anyone was killed." "The basilisk still needs to be dealt with," Moody growled. "Beast like that can live for centuries, and it'll be hungry after 50 years of hibernation. A team of specialists from the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures is standing by," Bones informed them. "Once we've confirmed the chamber's location, they'll neutralize the threat." "I can help with that," Harry offered. "The entrance is in the second-floor girls' lavatory, Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. You need a parcel mouth to open it, and, well..." He shrugged. "That's me." The adults exchanged glances. "Absolutely not," Sirius said immediately. "You've done your part, Harry. The professionals will take it from here." "None of whom speak Parseltongue," Harry pointed out. "And sending someone into the chamber without that ability could be suicide if the basilisk is active." "He has a point," Remus said reluctantly. "Without Parseltongue, they might not be able to access the chamber at all, let alone control the situation once inside." A debate ensued among the adults, with Sirius adamantly opposed to Harry's involvement and Bones arguing for practicality. Harry exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione, who both looked as determined as he felt. They'd uncovered this threat together, it seemed right they should help resolve it. "I have a compromise," McGonagall finally declared, silencing the arguments. "Mr. Potter will accompany the team only to open the entrance and provide translation if needed. He will remain outside the chamber itself with a protective detail while the specialists handle the basilisk. Non-negotiable," she added when Harry opened his mouth to protest. Given the alternatives, being excluded entirely or McGonagall reporting his nighttime library excursion, Harry reluctantly agreed. With Ginny safely in Madame Pomfrey's care and the diary secured by the unspeakables, they moved on to the next phase, accessing and securing the Chamber of Secrets. As they left the office, Sirius fell into step beside Harry. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly, "for figuring this out and getting help instead of trying to handle it yourself. That shows real maturity." "I remembered what you said about asking for help when I need it," Harry replied. "About not having to face everything alone anymore." Sirius smiled, resting a hand on Harry's shoulder. "James would be proud too." And Lily would be absolutely terrified but also secretly impressed. She had a knack for unraveling mysteries herself. The warmth that filled Harry at these words carried him through the tense preparations that followed. Within an hour, a team had assembled outside Myrtle's bathroom, Bones leading, flanked by Moody and 2 Aurors Harry didn't recognize, plus 3 specialists from magical creatures in protective gear, the 2 unspeakables still studying the diary, and McGonagall representing Hogwarts. Sirius, Remus, Ron, and Hermione completed the group, having refused to be left behind. Moaning Myrtle herself provided the final confirmation of their theory, describing her death 50 years ago in dramatic detail, seeing yellow eyes by the sink before her body seized up and her spirit separated. The sink in question refused to work, and when Harry examined it closely, he found a tiny snake etched on one of the taps. Looking at it, focusing on its serpentine form, he felt the familiar shift in his perception that accompanied Parseltongue. "Open," he hissed. The sink shuddered, then began to move, the entire fixture sinking out of sight to reveal a large pipe wide enough for a person to slide into. The damp, musty smell of ancient stone and stagnant water wafted up from the opening. "Blimey," Ron whispered. The chamber's entrance was real. Slytherin's monster was real. And somewhere below them, a 1,000-year-old basilisk waited, perhaps already stirring with the diary's influence removed from Ginny. Harry looked around at the assembled group, the anxious but determined faces of his friends, the professional focus of the Aurors and specialists, the proud encouragement in Sirius's eyes. So different from how he might have faced this under Dumbledore's influence, alone, unprepared, guided by half-truths and manipulations toward a confrontation he wasn't ready for. "What now?" he asked Bones, ready to follow her lead rather than charging ahead recklessly. "Now," she replied, "we finish what Salazar Slytherin started 1,000 years ago, but not in the way he intended. Not with persecution, but with protection. Not with secrecy, but with transparency." She nodded to the specialists. "Secure the chamber and neutralize the basilisk. Mr. Potter will provide Parseltongue assistance from a safe distance if needed." As the team prepared to descend, Harry felt a strange sense of closure. The Chamber of Secrets, one of Hogwarts' oldest mysteries, was about to be unveiled not as a weapon against Muggleborns but as a remnant of the past that needed to be addressed and reconciled with the present. Perhaps that was the real lesson here, that the wizarding world's future lay not in clinging to ancient prejudices or hiding dark secrets, but in confronting them openly, learning from them, and moving forward together. "Ready, Mr. Potter?" McGonagall asked. Harry nodded, feeling more ready than he had for anything in his life. "Let's end this." The great hall buzzed with excitement as students gathered for the special assembly McGonagall had called. 3 days had passed since the Chamber of Secrets had been accessed and the basilisk neutralized, not killed, but rather placed in a magical stasis and transported to the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures for study. The chamber itself had been thoroughly explored and secured, its secrets documented by ministry officials and Hogwarts staff working together. Harry sat with Ron and Hermione at the Gryffindor table, aware of but no longer bothered by the stares and whispers directed his way. Beside them, Ginny was recovering well, though she still had moments of tearful guilt over her unwitting role in the events. The diary, confirmed as a Horcrux, had been taken to the Department of Mysteries for further study and eventual destruction. Most significantly, Lucius Malfoy had been arrested yesterday after Dobby provided testimony about his master's plot to discredit the Weasley family and undermine the progressive elements at Hogwarts. The arrest had sent shockwaves through the pureblood community and left Draco sullen and isolated at the Slytherin table. "Attention, everyone," McGonagall called, rising from the headmistress's chair. The hall quieted immediately. "Thank you for your patience and cooperation during recent events. I know there have been many rumors, and today I intend to address them with the truth, something Hogwarts has sometimes lacked in recent years." She proceeded to explain the Chamber of Secrets, the basilisk, and the plot involving the diary, carefully omitting the Horcrux details while emphasizing that the danger had been completely neutralized. She acknowledged the role Harry, Ron, and Hermione had played in uncovering the threat, awarding them 50 points each for exceptional service to the school. Furthermore, McGonagall continued, these events have highlighted the need for greater transparency and unity within our school. The divisions between houses, while traditional, should not become barriers to cooperation and mutual respect. Salazar Slytherin's legacy is complex, his talents and contributions to Hogwarts were significant, but his prejudices were deeply flawed. At the Slytherin table, reactions were mixed. Some students looked offended, others thoughtful. Professor Snape, sitting at the staff table, remained impassive, though his eyes flickered briefly to Harry. To that end, McGonagall announced, I am instituting several changes for the remainder of this school year and beyond. First, an elective course on wizarding ethics and governance will be offered to third years and above, examining the historical treatment of Muggleborns, magical creatures, and other marginalized groups in our society. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the hall. This was a bold departure from the traditional Hogwarts curriculum. Second, a new inter-house study and activity program will begin next month, with students from all houses working together on academic and creative projects. Participation will be voluntary but strongly encouraged. She continued outlining her vision for a more integrated, forward-thinking Hogwarts, one that honored tradition while acknowledging its flaws and embracing change where needed. By the time she concluded, the Great Hall was abuzz with discussion, not all of it positive, but all of it engaged. She's brilliant, Hermione whispered admiringly. Using the chamber incident to push through reforms that might otherwise have taken years to implement. Slytherin doesn't look happy, Ron observed, nodding toward the far table where many students sat with arms crossed or faces scowling. Some do, Harry pointed out. He'd noticed a few Slytherins, particularly younger students, listening with apparent interest and even enthusiasm to McGonagall's proposals. Maybe they're tired of being pigeonholed as the evil house, too. As the assembly dispersed for afternoon classes, Harry felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning, he found Professor Moody standing behind him, magical eyes spinning wildly as usual. Potter. A word in private? Harry nodded, excusing himself from his friends with a promise to catch up in Transfiguration. He followed Moody to an empty classroom nearby. What is it, Professor? Has something else happened with the chamber? No, the chamber's secure. This is about something else entirely. Moody reached into his coat and withdrew a small, ornate golden cup. Recognize this? Harry shook his head. No, sir. Should I? Not specifically, no. But you might recognize what's inside it, or rather, what was inside it until yesterday. Moody set the cup on a desk. This is Helga Hufflepuff's cup. A priceless historical artifact that somehow ended up in the Lestrange vault at Gringotts. And until the unspeakables cleansed it yesterday, it contained another Horcrux. Harry stared at the cup, processing this revelation. Another one? How many did he make? That's the question, isn't it? Moody's scarred face twisted into a grimace. The diary, the cup, and whatever was in your scar makes 3 we know of. But based on evidence found in Dumbledore's private research after his arrest, the Department of Mysteries believes there are more. Riddle seems to have been obsessed with the number 7, the most magically powerful number. He may have aimed to split his soul into 7 pieces. 7. Harry felt sick at the implication. So there could be 4 more out there. 3 more, technically. The 7th piece would be the main soul fragment in whatever form Voldemort currently exists. Moody's magical eye fixed on Harry. Dumbledore was tracking them, searching for them. It was perhaps the one truly noble aspect of his otherwise manipulative agenda. He believed destroying them all was essential to permanently defeating Voldemort. And he was right about that part, Harry acknowledged reluctantly. If each Horcrux can restore Voldemort like the diary nearly did through Ginny. Exactly. The threat remains until they're all found and destroyed. Moody leaned forward, his voice dropping. The Ministry's pursuing this now, but they're hampered by bureaucracy and competing priorities. Bones is doing her best, but there are still those who'd rather pretend Voldemort is gone for good. Harry studied the grizzled ex-Auror. Why are you telling me this, sir? Because you have a right to know. Because the prophecy, whatever it truly means, connects you to this fight. And because I respect you enough not to coddle you with comfortable half-truths. Moody's normal eye held Harry's gaze steadily. Knowledge is power, Potter. What you choose to do with it is your decision. It was the most straightforward answer any adult had given him about his role in the conflict with Voldemort. Not pushing him toward a predetermined fate like Dumbledore, not shielding him from harsh realities like Sirius sometimes tried to do, but simply providing information and respecting his autonomy. I appreciate that, Professor, Harry said sincerely. What happens now with the search for the other Horcruxes? The Unspeakables are analyzing Dumbledore's research for clues. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement is discreetly investigating possible locations. And I. Moody paused, his magical eye spinning toward the door briefly before continuing. I'm keeping my eyes open and my wand ready. Constant vigilance, as always. He gestured toward the cup. This is being returned to the Hufflepuff family estate after centuries missing. The good that comes from destroying these abominations isn't just removing Voldemort's anchors to immortality, it's restoring what he stole, healing the wounds he inflicted on our world. The symbolism wasn't lost on Harry. His own journey since the Sorting Hat's intervention had been similar, reclaiming what Dumbledore had taken from him, healing from the manipulations, growing into his own power and purpose rather than following someone else's design. When the time comes, Harry said slowly, if Voldemort does return and the prophecy does matter. I want to face him on my terms. Not as a sacrifice or a weapon, but as myself, with people I trust beside me. Moody nodded approvingly. That's the right approach. The strongest magic has always come from choice, Potter, from willing sacrifice and freely given love, not from coercion or manipulation. He picked up the cup, returning it to a secure inner pocket. Now, you'd better get to Transfiguration before Burbage sends out a search party. As Harry hurried to class, Moody's words echoed in his mind. The strongest magic comes from choice. It seemed like a direct rebuttal of Dumbledore's approach, the controlled environment, the careful manipulation, the orchestrated suffering designed to shape Harry into a willing sacrifice. Perhaps that was the power the Dark Lord knows not referenced in the prophecy, not some specific magical ability or secret spell, but simply the power of genuine choice, of facing darkness not because destiny demanded it but because it was the right thing to do. The Christmas holidays arrived with a blanket of snow that transformed the Hogwarts grounds into a glistening white landscape. Most students had departed on the Hogwarts Express the previous day, leaving the castle quiet and peaceful. Harry, however, had remained behind to participate in a private ceremony that McGonagall had arranged in the Chamber of Secrets, now officially renamed the Founder's Archive after the discovery of Slytherin's extensive library within its deeper chambers. Ready, Harry? Sirius asked, straightening the formal robes he'd insisted Harry wear for the occasion. They stood in Myrtle's bathroom, waiting for the others to arrive. I think so, Harry replied, still not entirely comfortable in the stiff, ceremonial garments. Though I'm not sure why this needs to be so formal. We're just opening the chamber for the research team. Sirius grinned mysteriously. It's a bit more than that, pup. You'll see. Before Harry could press for details, the bathroom door opened to admit an impressive procession, McGonagall in her finest tartan robes, Amelia Bones in formal ministry attire, representatives from each Hogwarts house including Professors Flitwick, Sprout, and Snape, and to Harry's surprise, an elderly which he recognized from photographs as Augusta Longbottom, accompanied by a nervous-looking Neville. Mr. Potter, McGonagall greeted him. Thank you for agreeing to assist us today. This is an historic occasion for Hogwarts. Indeed, Madame Longbottom said, eyeing Harry with sharp interest. The first official opening of Salazar's chamber in the presence of representatives from all four houses. A symbol of unity and progress. Harry glanced at Neville questioningly. Grand's on the Board of Governors now, Neville explained quietly. After Lucius Malfoy was arrested, they needed someone to fill his seat. She's representing the board today. The significance of this change wasn't lost on Harry. With Augusta Longbottom, a formidable witch known for her progressive views despite her traditional manner, replacing Malfoy on the board, McGonagall's reforms would have a much stronger chance of success. "If you would do the honors, Mr. Potter," McGonagall requested, gesturing toward the sink that concealed the chamber's entrance. Harry stepped forward, focusing on the tiny serpent engraving. "Open," he commanded in Parseltongue. The sink transformed as it had before, revealing the entrance pipe, though it had been significantly modified since their first descent. Rather than a slimy slide, it now featured a spiraling staircase with proper handrails. "Much better than last time," Ron commented from beside Hermione. They'd been invited as key participants in the discovery. The group descended in orderly fashion, McGonagall leading with Bones, followed by the House representatives, then Harry, Sirius, and the others. The tunnel beyond the pipe had been thoroughly cleaned and reinforced, magical lights now illuminating the path that had once been dark and treacherous. They reached the inner door, the one with the serpent carvings that required Parseltongue to open. Again, Harry provided the command, and the circular door swung open to reveal the chamber proper. But it was no longer the dank, forbidding space Harry remembered from the basilisk incident. The entire chamber had been transformed. The stone floor was polished to a high shine, the serpent columns had been cleaned and repaired, and the enormous statue of Salazar Slytherin had been respectfully modified to remove its menacing aspect while preserving its historical significance. New additions included research tables, archival shelving, and a central platform where representatives from the Department of Mysteries were already at work examining artifacts discovered in the chamber's depths. "Welcome," McGonagall announced, "to the official opening of the Founders' Archive, Hogwarts' newest educational resource and historical preservation site." Harry stared in amazement at the transformation. "This is incredible. And long overdue," Bones added. For centuries, this chamber was associated only with fear and prejudice. Today, we reclaim it as a place of learning and unity, as Hogwarts itself was always meant to be. The ceremony that followed was brief but meaningful. Representatives from each house offered statements about moving forward together while honoring the best parts of their founders' legacies. Even Snape participated, his contribution surprisingly eloquent about ambition tempered by wisdom and cunning guided by ethics. Harry expected that to conclude the proceedings, but McGonagall had one final surprise. "And now," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber, "we come to the reason I specifically requested Mr. Potter's presence today, beyond his Parseltongue abilities." She nodded to Sirius, who stepped forward with a scroll bearing the Hogwarts seal. "Harry James Potter," he began formally, though his eyes twinkled with suppressed excitement, "as the wizard whose actions led to the rediscovery and reclamation of this chamber, and as a student who has demonstrated exceptional courage, scholarship, loyalty, and resourcefulness, qualities valued by all four founders, the Board of Governors of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry hereby grants you the title of Honorary Custodian of the Founders' Archive." He unrolled the scroll, revealing an ornate certificate bearing Harry's name and the signatures of all board members. "This title comes with certain privileges and responsibilities, which Headmistress McGonagall will explain." McGonagall stepped forward as Sirius handed Harry the scroll. "This is not merely a ceremonial honor, Mr. Potter. As custodian, you will have special access to the archive for research purposes, a role in approving new additions to the collection, and the responsibility of serving as a bridge between the archive and the student body." She smiled slightly at his dumbfounded expression. "Consider it recognition of your unique connection to Hogwarts and its history." Thank you," Harry managed, genuinely moved by the gesture. "I don't know what to say." "You could say something in Parseltongue," Ron suggested with a grin. "Very appropriate for the occasion." The tension broke as laughter rippled through the group. Even Augusta Longbottom's stern expression softened. "Actually," Harry said, an idea forming, "there is something I'd like to do, if it's permitted." He looked to McGonagall. Could I invite someone else to share this custodianship? Someone who was equally involved in discovering the chamber's secret and stopping the basilisk? McGonagall raised an eyebrow. That would be irregular, but not impossible. Who did you have in mind? Harry gestured to Hermione, whose eyes widened in surprise. Hermione Granger. She figured out it was a basilisk, realized it was using the pipes, connected it to Myrtle's death 50 years ago. Without her research, we might never have solved the mystery in time. Mr. Potter, Augusta Longbottom cut in, her voice sharp, am I to understand you wish to share this honor with a Muggle-born student? The chamber went very quiet. Harry met the elderly witch's gaze steadily. Yes, Madame Longbottom. Hermione is the brightest witch of our year, possibly of our generation. Her blood status is irrelevant to her abilities or her contribution. For a moment, Augusta's expression remained stern. Then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled, a rare, approving expression that transformed her severe features. Well said, Mr. Potter. I was testing your conviction, and you've passed admirably. The board will approve your request. As will I, McGonagall added, looking pleased. Miss Granger, do you accept this shared custodianship? Hermione, blushing furiously but standing tall, nodded. I'd be honored, Professor. Then it's settled. McGonagall produced her wand and modified the scroll with a complex charm, adding Hermione's name beside Harry's. Let the record show that the Founders' Archive has 2 student custodians, representing both magical heritage and new blood, much like Hogwarts itself. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. In that moment, something shifted in the chamber, a sense of old prejudices giving way to new possibilities, ancient divisions beginning to heal. As the ceremony concluded and the group prepared to ascend back to the main castle, Harry found himself walking beside Neville, who had been quiet throughout the proceedings. Your grand seems brilliant, Harry offered. Intimidating, but brilliant. Neville smiled shyly. She is. Always has been. When she heard about what happened with the chamber and Malfoy's arrest, she went straight to the ministry and demanded to be considered for the board vacancy. Said it was time the Longbottoms took a more active role in shaping Hogwarts' future. I'm glad, Harry said sincerely. We need more people like her in positions of influence, people who judge others by their actions and abilities, not their bloodlines. Neville studied him thoughtfully. You know, Harry, when everything first happened with Dumbledore, I wasn't sure what it meant. For you, for the school, for all of us. But I think it might have been for the best, in the end. Not the way he manipulated you, that was horrible. But the changes happening now because of it. Harry considered this as they climbed the stairs. I think you're right, he said finally. Dumbledore had good intentions in some ways. He wanted to defeat Voldemort, protect the school, preserve what was good about the wizarding world. But his methods were wrong. He tried to control everything himself, make all the decisions, keep all the secrets. And now we're doing it differently, Neville observed. More people involved, more transparency, more cooperation. Exactly. Harry smiled at his friend. And that includes you, Neville. You've got as much at stake in this as I do, in your own way. Neville looked startled, then thoughtful. Because of what happened to my parents? Because the prophecy could have meant me? Both those things, Harry agreed, but also because you're a good person who cares about doing what's right. That matters more than prophecies or destinies or any of it. They reached the bathroom level, emerging into the castle proper where house elves had prepared a celebratory luncheon in a nearby classroom. As the group dispersed to enjoy the refreshments, Sirius pulled Harry aside. Proud of you, pup, he said quietly. What you did for Hermione down there, that's exactly the kind of thing James and Lily would have done. Harry felt warmth spread through his chest at the comparison. It just felt right. Hermione deserves recognition for her brilliance, especially in a world that still looks down on Muggleborns in some quarters. It was a political statement as much as a personal one, Sirius observed shrewdly. You're learning to use your influence. Is that manipulative? Harry asked, suddenly concerned. I don't want to be like Dumbledore, using people and situations for some grand plan. Sirius shook his head firmly. Not at all. There's a world of difference between manipulation and leadership, between controlling others and empowering them. Dumbledore kept people in the dark, used them as pieces on a chessboard. You just put your friend in the spotlight beside you, acknowledged her contributions openly. Relieved, Harry nodded. I'm still figuring all this out, how to deal with having influence just because of who I am or what happened to me. You'll get there, Sirius assured him. And you've got people around you who'll call you out if you start getting a big head. He grinned. Speaking of which, have you told your friends about your Christmas plans yet? Harry brightened. Not all the details. Just that they're invited to visit Grimmauld Place for the New Year's celebration. Well, might want to mention that the Minister of Magic herself will be attending. And that the event is doubling as a strategy meeting for the progressive faction within the Wizengamot. Sirius winked. Augusta Longbottom, Arthur and Molly Weasley, Amelia Bones, and a dozen others, all gathering to discuss the future of Wizarding Britain, with the boy who lived and his friends right in the middle of it. Harry's eyes widened. Sirius. That's huge. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Wanted it to be a surprise. Besides, I figured you had enough on your plate with end-of-term exams and this ceremony. Sirius squeezed his shoulder. It's your choice how involved you want to be, of course. No pressure. But I thought you should have the opportunity to be part of the conversation about where our world goes from here. The offer represented everything Dumbledore hadn't given him: information, agency, a place at the table, and the freedom to choose his own level of involvement. It was overwhelming but also deeply right. I want to be involved, Harry said decisively. Not just for me, but for everyone affected by these issues. For Hermione and other Muggleborns, for people like Remus who face discrimination, for future students at Hogwarts who deserve better than what we got. Pride shone in Sirius's eyes. That's my godson. Now come on, let's grab some food before Ron demolishes it all. Growing wizards need their strength, especially ones who are changing the world. As they joined the celebration, Harry found himself surrounded by people who had become his extended family, friends, teachers, mentors, all united by a common purpose despite their different backgrounds and perspectives. So different from the isolation Dumbledore had engineered for him. The path ahead would not be easy. Voldemort's Horcruxes remained to be found and destroyed. The prophecy still hung over Harry's future, ambiguous but undeniable. The wizarding world's deeply ingrained prejudices would not disappear overnight. But for the first time, Harry felt truly prepared to face these challenges, not as the weapon Dumbledore had tried to forge, but as the person he was choosing to become. Someone shaped by friendship rather than isolation, by knowledge rather than ignorance, by willing courage rather than manufactured martyrdom. He caught Hermione's eye across the room, where she was animatedly discussing the archive's potential with Professor Flitwick. She beamed at him, raising her glass in a silent toast to their shared custodianship. Ron stood nearby, laughing at something Neville had said, his natural humor helping to integrate the formerly shy boy into their expanding circle of friends. This was what the Sorting Hat had given him when it summoned those Aurors 3 months ago, not just freedom from manipulation, not just the removal of magical bindings and Horcruxes, but the chance to build authentic connections and create a future on his own terms. Harry raised his glass in return, silently thanking the ancient magical artifact that had changed everything with a single, courageous intervention. The Sorting Hat had entered his mind expecting to find merely another first year to place. Instead, it had discovered Dumbledore's web of manipulation, and in tearing it apart, had helped Harry Potter truly begin to live. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.